Happy Friday, Flesh and Blood players. So nice to see you. So glad to be here with you in preparation for the latest pre-release coming up this weekend from LSS. It's, of course, The Hunted, a limited experience that I have really been enjoying so far, even though I have only had maybe 4 drafts thus far. And no sealed whatsoever. And of course, all of the coverage from the world premiere in Prague. That all being said, I'm finally going to get my hands on some physical cards this weekend, and I could not be more stoked. Let's see. Is the store in Cali? Asks Cardboard Flesh and Blood. That's a good question. I'm not sure which store you're referring to. Arcane Games and Events does not have a store or an online marketplace for that matter. We are not in the card selling business. We tend to leave that to the physical stores that we hang out in for our events because it's generally viewed by us as a conflict of interest. If we're selling cards, then the stores that are kind enough to host us can't. And usually the agreement is that we're there hosting the event and they make all the profit on whatever they sell behind the case. So if you're asking about the store that we host events at, currently it is Top Deck Keep, and that is in Riverside, California. Speaking of which, we are going to be hosting yet another Arcane Games and Events event. That's coming up this February, the 1st of February, in fact, and it's going to be a hunted draft, which is partially why we are going over limited today. But, of course, the main reason is because y'all are going to be going to pre-releases all this weekend, and I want you to be ready. I want you to 4-0 and really enjoy your experience as much as I have so far. I think it's a really good limited set. It's really hot and technical and yeah, explosive, which is something that I always enjoy in limited. Also, I have heard kind of the scuttlebutt has been that they really nailed sealed, which was not my feeling in Rosetta. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed it a lot, but you had a tendency to gravitate towards Earth heroes, and it kind of felt like if you didn't open enough decomposed synergy, you were a little bit dead in the water. If you were forced into lightning, oftentimes you would be taken to the buzzer and kind of wouldn't get there in the end. I have heard that is not the case in the Hunted, that all 3 heroes are fairly viable. I'm curious about the high density of 3 blocks and Assassin, but that's all stuff we're going to go over. First and foremost, we got to do a little bit of housekeeping, and that means we're doing some plugs. First of all, join our Discord. That's discord.age.events. There you can hang out with all of the fantabulous players that are at the Arcane Games and Events Open Series, as well as many more. We post deck lists there. We got community events, show matches, and more. Join our Discord. We would love to see you there, and we'd love to have you hanging out, joining in on the conversation. Next up, in case you haven't heard, Los Angeles and the greater area has been devastated by wildfires. It was a couple weeks ago now when it was really bad. We had 100-mile-an-hour winds the night before, which really started a little blaze started and turned into something much more. And a couple of our local community fab members have been devastated by it. They've got some GoFundMes up if you know them personally. If you see them on a regular basis, however, I would recommend you just submit your donation in cash to them or via Venmo, because GoFundMe does take a whopping 5% out of the total amount raised. So just be wary of that your donation is getting siphoned off a little bit. And if your objective is giving to people that have been devastated by chaotic circumstances outside of their control, then, maybe all of it should go to them. That's my stance on it. Anyway, moving on, the Arcane Games and Events Open Series Pro Team Stream Dream is coming back to your screens on our YouTube channel. That means myself, Joshua Rath, Jonah Overhault, Colin Erickson, and everyone else here at the Stream Dream on the AGE Pro Team is going to be back at it. We had a little bit of a forced break over the holiday, namely because of the craziness of the World Championship in Osaka, which most of us attended, and also because there wasn't a whole lot going on in our fab world, and we decided that time was better served sorting out our own lives, because this is something that we do for fun, and on a volunteer basis. So all the boys took a break, but we're coming back. We're coming back strong because we've got a ton of new stuff coming in the form of product. And we're going to get you ready for the Hunted CC meta as well as Limited. Next up, of course, is something I already kind of tagged. This is the February Open coming to you on February 1st here on the West Coast. That'll be at Top Deck Keep in Riverside, California. They can serve all of your fab singles needs. So the recommendation from Tyler Horspool, who is our contact over there at Top Deck Keep, also a fantastic Flesh and Blood player in his own right. His recommendation is to go on their online store. You can even find them on TCG Player Marketplace, if I'm not mistaken. You can put your order in and let them know that you're going to pick it up on site, and they'll take care of you there. That way you can have everything you need at your fingertips before you even submit your deck list. So I highly recommend doing that, and also just supporting the store that supports us. We would really appreciate that. Of course, this next open is not really going to require a whole lot of pre-ordering singles because it is, of course, the Hunted Draft. So just show up. We'll have the product at the ready for you. You can go ahead and sign up at www.age.events. Hope to see you there. Next up, of course, is AGE East. That's right, we got 2 opens coming at you on the YouTubes in February. The first one, of course, is on our beloved West Coast at Top Deck Keep. The second is in a brand new region for us. That's on February 9th at Great Stories Comics and Gaming in Whitensville, Massachusetts. If you happen to be in the area, we would love to have you join in on this inaugural open. We hope to bring you one of these every single month, just like we do on the West Coast, and for it all to boil down to a Players' Championship, the top 16 qualifying players over the course of the year, duking it out for a grand prize of $3,000. If you want to attend the first ever AGE East Open, go to east.age.events, and you can buy your tickets straight from the store, Great Stories. This first one's a little bit weird because we are just tacking on to their RTN. So rather than having AGE cash pricing in addition, it's just going to be AGE points that's going to be added on to the total prize pool. Now, all of the RTN pricing still exists there. The only difference is that you're going to get AGE points. We're going to stream it. All of the normal AGE casters, myself, Michael Murray, possibly even a little visit from Sam O'Byrne, will be happening, and we'll be casting remotely from the comfort of our producer Justin's house here on the West Coast. We can't wait to see what the East has to offer us in terms of fresh talent and new stories. So I hope you will join us and make it a banger of an event so that we can do it every single month from then on. Yep, that's right. We're doing double the work here, but that's just because we love doing the work so much. We got a little bit of chat going on. Let me visit you guys. Let me answer some questions. Anthony Pham says our most handsome team member is streaming today, huh? I back at you, buddy. I think you got me beat. Clark Moore says so excited for the draft. AGE, we are too, and not only because we're going to have the same great players that you see every single week, we're also going to be utilizing the real-time graphics engine, which is a pet project of our producer Justin's. If you saw our Part the Misfail draft last year, you know what I'm talking about. We do draft coverage like nobody else. We're talking about manipulatable data. Once we see a finished deck list, we also have a draft tracker as we move through. We're going to cover one player's draft in each of those. It'll be 3 total drafts, 2 for Swiss and 1 for top 8. And there's just nothing else like it. Tune in and see what I'm talking about. If you're not a limited player, this is going to make you more excited about it, because not only are we going to be watching really good draft players doing what they do, you're also going to have high-level commentary from myself and not Michael Murray at the AGE West. It'll be myself and Marcus Brown, friend of the show, who will be heading up that broadcast. Michael Murray will be playing in it, and if he drops out, maybe we can convince him to scoot on back into the booth. We'll see. Patrick Rubicalva is here, Greasy Choir Boy. Will the usual team be covering AGE East? I think I've kind of covered that for you already, Patrick. It'll be the primaries will be myself and Michael Murray. We would love to get Sam O'Byrne attached to it. He's told me that if he's around, he's definitely going to swing by and see what we got going on in terms of this whole remote broadcast voodoo situation that we got set up. I can't wait to show it off, and I hope you'll be there to help us make it really eventful. Okay, I have been yapping for 10 minutes now about things that are not about the main topic. So let's go ahead and get into the main topic, shall we? So I promise to get you ready for your pre-release. The way I'm going to do that is by showing you some really, really good deck lists that we've been posting in the Arcane Games and Events Pro Team Discord. Now, these are draft decks because we don't have an online sealed queue from the Runaways this year. I did go ahead and say that I was going to do this stream before I realized that. So there's not going to be any sealed play today, unfortunately. That being said, you're still going to get a good look at what a really solid deck looks like for each of these three heroes. We're also going to go a level deeper. We're going to talk about each of the cards in these lists. We can also go ahead and move into edit mode on February, and we will take a look at some of the cards that might be traps moving forward in both your sealed pools and your drafts in the future. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look first at a 3-0 Cindra deck by, yes, of course, Alex Vore, who is an absolutely stellar drafter. And he is serving as our draft captain this season for testing for up until PT London. I'm sure thereafter too, because he's a really smart guy. And Justin and I are trying to put together an intro to limited series with him as well. We would like to do it up with a lot of good production value. So stay tuned for that. It's not going to be anytime soon, but we're really excited to sit down with him and turn this into something, because we'll have a lot of fun making it. And there's so much knowledge that you can gain by listening to that guy talk. We make fun of him for yapping all the time, but he really is a good resource. I've learned a ton from him already, and I hope you will too. So here's a little look inside, behind the curtain of the AGE Pro Team. Anthony Pham says, if only he's as good at 40-yard dashes as he is at draft. It's true. Alex talks a big game in a lot of things, and from what I hear, his 40-yard dash is not all it's cracked up to be, at least not compared to his draft game. Okay, cool. So here we go. This is Cindra. Cindra is our Royal Draconic Ninja hero, one of two Draconic heroes in this limited set. So Cindra does pretty typical ninja things. That being said, her sequencing can be difficult, namely because of this second paragraph of text here. Once per turn instant, pay 3, equip up to 2 Draconic daggers from your graveyard. That's right, you can get 2 for the price of 1. So if you've got both of your daggers in your graveyard, you only have to pay the once to get both of them back. Equip up to 2 Draconic daggers from your graveyard. This costs 1 less to activate for each Draconic chain link you control. So if this is kind of reminiscent of our original Draconic Ninja, Phi, it's because it's almost exactly the same ability, only instead of fetching a Phoenix Flame, you are fetching your Kunai of Retribution, which I'm sure, not surprisingly at all, are pay 1 resource, 1 power, attack, go again, right? So these are 2 daggers that synergize with other daggery cards in the set. These are the things you're going to be fetching out of the bin. Since we're on the equipment suite here, let's talk about some of these best in slot equipments. We're not 100% sure if Danger Digits is best in slot for Cindra as of yet, but it's pretty dang good, right? Attack reaction, destroy this target dagger you control that isn't on the active chain link, deals 1 damage to the defending hero. So the value proposition for this, as opposed to Arakni, I think is a little bit higher for Cindra, because both of these heroes have the ability to use Danger Digits to essentially put their opponents who are at 2 life at 1 life, right? It's assured destruction, unless, of course, the opponent happened to pull a Sigil of Solace, which is in this limited format, or if they... honestly, I think that might be the only way to get around it if you're at 1 life. Oh, and also Calming Breeze, which is a discard prevent prevent 1 3 separate times, and then of course Shelter from the Storm, which is the same thing, only it's also a 0 for 4D react. So Danger Digits is pretty good here, not just because of that in Cindra, but also because you are able to flick daggers that are on an active chain link, even one that has already been resolved, right? So you can swing with a Kunai of Retribution, followed up with a couple other Draconic attacks, maybe get yourselves to the fabled 3 Draconic links wide so that your daggers are free to fetch from the bin. You can go ahead and Danger Digits on that 3rd chain link, flick that Kunai of Retribution that is already on the 1st link. It goes to the bin. You're still able to fetch it because it counts as a Draconic chain link, even if the dagger has been flicked and is no longer there. That's one of the really important interactions to understand about this set. Otherwise, in the equipment slot, we've got Coat of Allegiance, which is a really interesting Draconic piece. Action, destroy this, gain 1 resource. Until end of turn, you may only play cards that are Draconic. So this one is pretty cool to activate at the start of your turn. It can also turn some of your 1-cost 5 attacks into 1-card 5s, which is not a bad use case for it. But also because of those fealty tokens that you will probably be generating through the course of the game, you can often kind of cheat the downside of this card and just get a free resource. More on that as we move through the deck. So let's take a look generally at... Sorry, I'm going to skip over some of the other equipment pieces because they're... whatever. Let's get into them real quick. So we've got Hand of Vengeance. The entire Vengeance series is Draconic. So both Fang and Cindra can use it. You'll get used to it. You'll get used to this. There's a rare set of equipment that is generic that all 3 heroes can use. And then each of the heroes has access to 2 different sets of equipment, if that makes sense. So Assassin has Assassin Warrior equipment. They have Assassin Ninja equipment, which is these Leapfrog. It's the Leapfrog set. And then Warrior... and then both the Draconic heroes have both the Assassin / their class set of equipment and a Draconic set. And no surprise... Oh my gosh, Justin is in chat. He says, light mode my eyes. All right, I hear you. How do I change it? You're derailing the entire stream for this, Justin. I hope you're happy. I don't even know where it is. This? No. Do I have to go to my profile? Preferences. Theme? Should I change my theme? Boost Delicious? Ugh. Electric Foliage? Night of 1,000 Shadows? I guess it's that. What's the pits? I think I like the pits. Oh, or Rune Chant style. This is totally a worthwhile use of my time, by the way. I think I'm gonna go pits. Right? I'm an Azalea main sometimes. Okay, cool. Back to the list. What was I talking about? Each hero has access to 2 of these 3 sets of equipment, with, of course, a couple of additions like this, like Danger Digits. There's also some boots that go both for Assassin and Warrior that can be really handy at certain times. Bottom line, there is a lot of equipment floating around, folks. And if you don't... In draft, it's easier than it's ever been to get your full equipment suite. I'm curious what it'll feel like in sealed. I'm sure there's going to be situations where you've got a ton of redundant slots in a particular... a ton of redundant pieces in particular slots, like chest, arm, head, whatever, or a bunch of redundant slots when it comes to the specific heroes that they're wearable by. So keep an eye out for that. I'm wondering if that is going to be a really important part of choosing which direction to go in sealed. That being said, cards might be a bigger indicator. We'll move through that as we go. Okay, so we were talking about the Vengeance series. This is the Draconic series, like the kind of standard common Draconic series. Every single one of these is going to have some sort of active text that messes with Arakni, right? Because the story reason for this is that the Draconic heroes are going after Arakni after he killed the Emperor, and so they're going to very specifically target Arakni. Never hurts to have some of these in the sideboard, as you'll see, especially when there's some other cards that directly target certain heroes. Sideboard, being able to sideboard effectively is going to be a massive part of this limited set, both in sealed and draft. So keep an eye out for that. So they're not bad. Also, just about every single one of these equipment is going to block for 1 at its floor, right? Which is also something that we don't typically see in a lot of LSS limited sets, is the ability to get 4 block out of your equipment without even trying, really. So proceeding on, Heart of Vengeance, just like that, is going to give you a resource as long as... your next attack this turn that targets Arakni costs 1 less to play or activate. So just staying on theme with dealing with resources. Next, we move to the Leapfrog set. This is Assassin Ninja. This is not generic. I've been seeing a lot of people run into this. I did myself on my first draft. I drafted some Leapfrog stuff in a Fang deck because I thought that was legal, because I thought they were generic. They're not. It's Assassin Ninja. So if you go into it knowing that there's kind of like these... it's a triangle of this common equipment. Each one only fits into 2 heroes. I think you won't fall for that trap that I fell for. So every single one of the Leapfrog equipment blocks for 1, has Blade Break, and when an opponent plays or activates an attack reaction, you may add this to the active chain link as a defending card, which is kind of sweet because you can go into a block knowing that you're not dead as long as they don't have a reaction, and then you can always be sitting back holding on. This is like the opposite effect of Danger Digits, right? Danger Digits is working as a bit of game-closing inevitability in terms of offense. These, just being out on the battlefield, have this threat of activation effect that maybe changes the way that your opponent plays. Anytime we can get inside our opponent's heads and change the way that they're going to play, it's a fun way to play Flesh and Blood, personally, in my opinion. So be very careful about blocking with these early and using them just as, generic Blade Break block cards. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you need to cover up an on-hit, and that is A-okay. But identify the moments where you can hold these back. Identify the moments where you can use instant speed abilities as a way to leverage a little bit more out of your game, if that makes sense. Wait for the last possible moment. In general, that is a good policy in card games, in my opinion. Okay, let's move on to the main part of Alex's deck here. So first thing I'm noticing is that he's got 1 Majestic. He's got essentially 2 Majestics because he's got this legendary rare for Cindra. I kind of tend to count that as a Majestic because it's legendary, and I do think it's short printed a little bit. The Fang equivalent, of course, is Fire and Brimstone. So I'm going to call this like a 2 Majestic deck here. I think expecting to see Majestics either in draft or in sealed is maybe hoping for too much. That being said, if you happen to pull one, it's worthwhile building around, especially in draft. If you see this like pack 1, pick 1, and you don't have a clear like stay open pick, oftentimes you can just grab this guy up and build around it. Elliot Sloan says legendary and rare on the same card. Yuck. Yeah, I tend to agree, bud. The curious thing about these legendary cards, which we talked about in our spoiler video for Fire and Brimstone, I'm still really stoked that we got to spoil that card, is that this legendary text now reads, you may only have 1 Wrath of Retribution in a constructed deck. This is not a constructed deck. So if you happen to be lucky enough to pull 2 or more Fire and Brimstones or 2 or more Wrath of Retributions in your sealed pools tomorrow and all throughout the weekend, you can use them as many as you want. That being said, if the pack coalition is correct in the Runaways draft queues, it really doesn't seem like it's feasible to get your hands on more than 1 of these based on the packs I've been revealing. That being said, I'm sure the packs are a little bit off from what the the physical ones will have inside them. So I don't know. Maybe I'm sure we're going to see one or two people at pre-release this weekend who pull multiple of these. Just know that it is legal to play, and more power to you. You know. He's also got a really nasty Majestic in Pain in the Backside. There's a 0 for 3 go again, 2 block. When this hits a hero, target dagger you control deals 1 damage to them. If damage is dealt this way, the dagger is hit. Notice what is missing from this card. What is missing from this card is that last line of text that we usually see with flick effects that says, destroy the dagger. No destroy the dagger on Pain in the Backside, which means you just get a free source of 1 true damage. Which true damage is something we're going to be talking about a lot moving forward in this video. And let's just define it real quick. True damage comes from, I don't know what game it comes from. Maybe it comes from World of Warcraft, honestly, where true damage is something that ignores armor, shields, anything that is built on top of somebody's life total, right? In this case, in Flesh and Blood, we kind of use true damage to talk about evasive damage. So true is not quite accurate in terms of the way true damage has worked in other games, but in this limited format, flick effects are pretty much just that. There are very few ways to prevent the damage that it causes, and your opponents are going to play differently knowing that you have access to it, which is why danger digits, part of the value proposition is that your opponent can't go to 1, so they have to change the way they block, etc. These flick effects are everywhere in the Hunted, so you're going to have to be aware of them, and you're going to have to know how to use your equipment and your blocks effectively to work around them. So Pain in the Backside, arguably the best one because it doesn't actually destroy the dagger. That being said, Cindra is often very happy to destroy her daggers because of her hero ability, but just having access to a Majestic that is essentially a 0 for 4 with no downside, who can complain about that? It also doesn't have to be on an active chain link. It can just be sitting in your equipment zone. More food for thought. Okay, so the fact that Alex pulled this tells me perhaps that this was a pack 1 pick 1. Either that or the Wrath of Retribution was a pack 1 pick 1, and then they decided to perhaps force Ninja. Perhaps he just happened to be in the seat 2 away from people that were definitely out of Ninja, and so he saw them maybe pack 3 or 4. Pick 3 or 4 in pack 2 or 3. It's a good question, but based on the fact that these are the 2 power cards in the deck, I kind of assume that one of those was this pack 1 pick 1. Okay. So what else do we see forming the backbone of this deck? The first thing I want to point to is Draconic starters. So Dust Runner Outlaw, a staple from Uprising, is a Draconic starter. So starters are super important because oftentimes you have other cards that care about you having 2 or more Draconic chain links. It is less important than it was in Uprising because Cindra's kunai are Draconic. So you have a built-in starter in your hero. That being said, you're not always going to have the blues to pay for them. We're running 8 blues in this 3-0 deck. One of which is in the... No. So we have 8 blues in the main board, 1 in the sideboard. 8 blues is totally fine. That's plenty to make it through one of these limited games. But you're a ninja. Inherently, you're going to run into 1 or 2 all red hands or hands where you maybe have a yellow and are a little bit resource deficient. And maybe you don't have that resource to send that dagger first. So it can't hurt to have some Draconic starters. Dust Runner Outlaw is great, comes in at a breakpoint, costs 1. Sometimes you can even pop your Code of Allegiance if that's the only thing you need to pay for your entire turn. And you maybe have the fealty to get through it. Dust Runner Outlaw, good. There is another one of these. Here it is, Ronin Renegade. Alex pulled one of these as well. Why not? Ronin Renegade is the slightly less powered version. 3 go again. So I think Alex is in a is in a good zone here, right? Because you are not starving for Draconic starters as long as you are aware of keeping at least one kunai up throughout the entire game. And we'll talk about the finer points of that as we move through the video. But having a couple Draconic starters is never a bad thing. Moving on from there, we should probably talk about these cards that care about 2 or more Draconic chain links. Generally speaking, they're Draconic as well, and they'll gain Go Again. So we got Cinder Skin Devotion and Lava Vein Loyalty are the 2 versions of this card. One of the things you'll notice when you're especially considering this against some of the other kind of head jab cards, head jab is something that you're going to hear a lot during limited coverage in the Hunted as well, and that's because head jab is the original 0 for 3 Go Again in Ninja. It's also a combo starter. It's like the fist combo starter. It's 0 for 3 Go Again, block 2. Now, Ninja is full of head jab like cards, and this one, Lava Vein Loyalty, Ronin Renegade, are no exception. Now, usually they will have another bit of upside that fits into the specific hero or talent that they're tailored to. In this case, for Ronin Renegade, it has Draconic written on it. So it's a card that can start a long series of Draconic chain links. Lava Vein Loyalty is another head jab effect. It's got the downside of needing something else Draconic to come before it, but it's got a major upside, and that's the +1 in the defense value slot. If you played with this in Uprising, you know how vital it can be to have a 3-block when you need it. The Hunted is no exception. The more 3 blocks you can fit into your deck, the more you are going to be able to prevent offensive value, because when you are inevitably on the back foot and need to throw a card in front of something, it's going to block for 1 more than you would otherwise. And if you've ever played a game of Flesh and Blood, you know how often these games come down to 1 life. So 3 blocks, good, right? Even if they have a tiny bit of downside here, which I would argue is very often not a downside because her weapons are Draconic. It's also important to mention that one of the reasons that she needed these kunai to have this bit of downside in that they are destroyed when the combat chain closes is because they're Draconic, and the fact that you have an on-demand Draconic starter is so vital. Okay. Cool. So we've covered that. These are like the role players in the deck, right? The Draconic starters, your 2 or more chain link gives Go Again, your Draconic continuers, let's call them. We're going to separate a lot of these cards into a couple different classes. Role players is one of them. These are the things that are not necessarily signaling you into getting into this hero. Like if I open a pack with a ton of like 2 red Lava Vein Loyalties or Cinder Skin Devotion or a Ronin Renegade plus a Lava Vein Loyalty, it's not necessarily like a strong signal that I should go into Cindra, but it does give me the option. The strong signals, the big power cards, your win conditions, are going to be things like Wrath of Retribution and Pain in the Backside. Then you kind of look to see if you have the role players to get the job done. Another role player I want to talk about is Fire Tenant Strike First. Now, this one has a bit of a trap in it, in that the art looks very Draconic because there's a lot of fire in it, but notice it is not Draconic. So this does not count as a Draconic starter. It is a Draconic continuer because it buffs the next Draconic attack, this combat chain, the next Draconic attack. It's important to say, not attack action card. So this can go ahead and buff up those kunai of Retribution. So an effective 0 for 4, also a very strong role player, but must be said that it is not Draconic. I fell into this trap. I hope you don't. Furthermore, speaking of more non-Draconic traps, we've got Grow Claws and also Grow Wings. Now, these are 2 cards that are really, really cool because, again, that bottom right corner. Only Grow Wings has 3 block, but it's really cool because of that. Grow Wings says if a Draconic attack was the last attack this combat chain, it gets Go Again. Grow Claws says if a Draconic attack was the last attack this combat chain, it gets +1. Going from a normal ninja role player, 1 for 4 Go Again. A lot of ninjas love to see that. to a 1 for 5 go again, which is even better. It's all about +1s in Flesh and Blood, isn't it? All about carrying that 1. So these are 2 more role players that are kind of cut from the same cloth. So a lot of these commons will follow a little thematic through line. You'll see that as we move to Fang and Arakni as well. We've already covered two through lines, one of which is just the fact that they have Draconic written on them. So we have the Draconic head jab, we have the Draconic leg tap, then we have gains go again if you have 2 or more Draconic chain links, head jab, and we have the leg tap that gains go again if you have 2 or more Draconic chain links, but they block for 3 because they have a little bit of downside. Next, we have the Draconic attack precedent cards. I'm going to call them Grow Claws and Grow Wings. Both still role players in this Cindra deck. It's important to mention that one of the things I've learned from speaking with Alex and from drafting with him is that as we play more of this limited format, we are more interested in running certain yellows in these decks, which sounds crazy. It sounds crazy to think that you're going to put bananas in your deck, especially when there are so many good red cards running around in the format. It feels very interesting that, especially when drafting it, you just kind of feel like you're getting gas the entire time you're drafting because there are so many cards that have been printed in the set that aren't cycles. They're just in the red. So it can often feel like even when you're maybe in a less than stellar spot that you're drafting a really powerful deck just because you're picking up so many red cards, which oftentimes in previous formats, you're getting stuck with yellows. If you're on the wrong seat, you have just subpar versions of everything of your role players and everything that you want. In this set, because there are so many red only cards, because it's a Draconic themed set, it can often feel like you just are sitting on a ton of gas. So back to my previous point. Some of these yellows are worth running, especially in draft when you're thinking about what you're going to get on the wheel, or maybe thinking about like, oh, should I hate pick this or should I take this yellow? Sometimes it's right to take that yellow. Grow Claws, the reason it's coming up in my mind is because Grow Claws is one of those cards. In the yellow, if you satisfy its condition, it comes in at a breakpoint of 4. Like I said, it's all about carrying the 1. In Ninja, it's all about saying 4 over and over and over again, whether that's a 4 from a Grow Claws, or excuse me, a Destroyer Outlaw, which just kind of comes in for 4 naturally, or saying 4 split over 2 chain links, like in the case of Fire Tenant Strike First. So more role players there. Continuing on with our role players, we've got Hot on Their Heels, which if you've got 2 or more Draconic chain links, it becomes a Lava Vein Loyalty with an on-hit. And that on-hit is Mark your opponent. Now, Hot on Their Heels is a good card, but it's also one of the few cards in Ninja, in Cindra specifically, that signals your opponent to block. So don't plan on this on-hit being relevant. It's nice to force cards out of your opponent's hand, but oftentimes they're going to have at least 1 3-block to throw in front of this. So I would not plan a turn cycle around this hitting. It's kind of like just an extra upside. Oftentimes it's just going to be a head jab or a 3-block, and that's A-okay. That being said, we should talk about the efficacy of marking an opponent and the importance of fealty tokens in Cindra in general. In general, Cindra does not require a high amount of fealty or consistent marking, not nearly as much as Fang and Arakni do. Arakni doesn't care about fealty at all. He can't create them, but marking specifically. That being said, I would insist that Cindra has some of the greatest upside for having 1 fealty. Now, Alex doesn't have a good example of this in this particular deck. However, if I go ahead and make a personal copy of this, I can edit it. Let's go over some of the cards that I'm talking about. All of the Art of the Dragon cards in Ninja are really massive, massive payoffs for having even 1 fealty. You also have the ability to, you have the easiest time, I would say. Oh, I don't have my tokens anymore. Fealty says if you have not created a fealty token or played a Draconic card this turn, destroy it at the end of the turn. So Cindra probably has the hardest time making them, but she has the easiest time keeping them around, and she has the easiest time getting a massive payoff for them. So this is one of the biggest cards. All of the Art of the Dragon cards are good in terms of popping fealty and making cards Draconic that aren't otherwise. Every single one of these Art of the Dragon cards are just ninja attacks. They're not Draconic ninja attacks, but they get an extra bonus effect if they become Draconic. This is probably the biggest bomb. When this attacks, Art of the Dragon Fire, it's a 1 cost, 5 power, 3 block. When this attacks, if it is Draconic, deal 2 damage to any target. Now, we've talked about true damage being a pivotal part of this limited format. This is one of the best true damage effects in the format because it deals more than 1 damage. Oftentimes, your opponent can think they're safe at 2, even if you're flaunting those danger digits. They're like, ha ha ha, 1 flick won't kill me, right? But Art of the Dragonfire says, JK Rafflemau, you're just dead. So people are going to be watching if this is wheeling or not wheeling, it'll never wheel, but going around a draft pod. This is something that people are going to be super mindful of, especially when, like, for example, if they are drafting and they pass one of these Art of the Dragon Fires, they're going to say, I'm going to be very wary of any Cindra opponent I go up against, and might consider blocking marking cards like hot on their heels a little more consistently. So Art of the Dragon Fire is probably the biggest payoff for having a fealty, but also Claw ain't bad. You know, a little bit of CNC at home with 5 power. Art of the Dragon Blood is absolutely huge, especially because it is an effect that is gained by becoming Draconic that doesn't require it to hit. 2 of these have on hits if they're Draconic. 2 of these have on attack effects when they're Draconic. And I would insist that those are the 2 most powerful ones. Let's go over the on attack versions. We've already gone over one of them. That is Art of the Dragon Fire. It says when this attacks, deal 2 damage to any target. Not when this attacks, it gains if this hits, if it's Draconic. So it's true damage that is even easier to send your opponent's way. Art of the Dragon Blood is also an on-attack effect if it is Draconic. It says when this attacks, if it is Draconic, it gets go again. And the next 3 Draconic cards you play this turn cost 1 less to play. Now, Art of the Dragon Blood has potentially the coolest synergy because you can kind of use it to also cheat around the downside of Code of Allegiance if you happen to pick one of those up as well. If you have multiple fealty tokens, you can use them on Art of the Dragon Blood to make it a combat chain starter. You can also use further fealty tokens to reduce the cost of the cards in your hand, which is insane. Art of the Dragon Blood is just really good. It is also the only one of the Art of the Dragon set that comes in Majestic Rarity and has 4 power and 0 cost. So even this is one that is even good as a combat chain ender if you can't make it Draconic. 0 for 4 with 3 block is just awesome. That is the rate that we want to be presenting in Flesh and Blood cards whenever possible. So what I like about Ninja in general is that it has this, it's like the baseline for numbers in Flesh and Blood. Usually their 0 for 4 cards have some sort of caveat to like turn on go again or get extra effects, stuff like that. But they're always good to just send anyway because they're above rate. All of their bread and butter cards, like Head Jab, are generally 0 for 3 go again. That's our baseline for what an on-rate card is. But they have the downside, usually, of not blocking for 3. So it's like, it's a perfect example of what a quintessential aggro deck looks like in Flesh and Blood. The 0 for 3 go again is the baseline that you're trying to hit every single time, but you're also constantly trying to cheat out extra value of cards that say 0 for 4 on them. I think that is the easiest way to explain to somebody like what does value mean in Flesh and Blood. Okay, cool. Enough harping on that. So Art of the Dragon Blood and Fire are the two cards that gain on attack effects. The two that gain on hit effects from being Draconic are Art of the Dragon Claw. Like the rest of the series, besides Blood, comes in for 5, blocks for 3, costs 1. This one says, when this attacks, if it's Draconic, it gets, when this hits a hero, destroy all cards in their arsenal. The other one is Art of the Dragon Scale, which is probably the one that you're going to see wheeling around most often. Like, I think if any of these is going to wheel, it's probably Art of the Dragon Scale, because its effect encourages which I should mention what it is. It's a 1-cost red, comes in for 5, blocks for 3. It says, when this attacks, if it's Draconic, it gets, when this hits a hero, put a -1 defense counter on an equipment they control. Then, if it has 0 defense, destroy it. Super cool effect. However, in limited, oftentimes this is just a signal for your opponent to block. And if you are up against one of the other 2 heroes in the hunted, oftentimes they are encouraged to block. Warrior has access, although not as much as in other sets. Warrior has access to a good amount of 3 blocks, and so does Arakni. And oftentimes, if they're going to lose their equipment, they'll just block with it. So this is probably the weakest of the Art of the Dragon series. Art of the Dragon Blood, probably the strongest, although I could see an argument for Fire being it. We talked about cards that are role players in the deck. These are cards that are signals that Cindra is open, or signals in your sealed pool that you should be moving into Cindra if you have the role players to support it. So I would argue that when you open up your 8 packs tomorrow or the next day, whenever you're doing your pre-release, you should look for these power cards, these signal cards, these signpost cards that you, if you go into that hero, you have a solid win condition. Then you look at the role players you have access to and your ratios to make sure that you can actually support getting these cards off. I hope that makes sense. So besides that, let's see if Alex has any more of these signpost cards. I would say that Silver Talons is maybe one of those, but not nearly as strong as any of the Art of the Dragons. Silver Talons comes in at rare rarity, and it says, when this attacks a hero, if it's Draconic, you may have target dagger you control deal 1 damage to them. If damage is dealt this way, the dagger is hit, destroy the dagger. So it's not like pain in the backside. It destroys the dagger, but oftentimes that's okay. Also, you have to weigh this one with the amount of role players you have that can do marking or just generate fealty on their own. One other thing I will say about Cindra in reference to marking and fealty is that if she is able to get a mark on an opponent, she has the easiest time of any of them getting that mark consumed and creating a fealty token. So, generally speaking, if you have ways to mark your opponent, you're going to get the fealty. So, I don't know. A lot of the discourse during the world premiere at Prague was that Cindra doesn't care. Like, she cares very little about the fealty, and giving her a fealty isn't very scary. Honestly, a lot of the times, if I don't know what is in my Cindra opponent's deck, I would say she has the easiest payoffs for it. So I wouldn't shy away from a Cindra deck saying like, oh, I have too much marking, or like she doesn't care about it. No, be very careful about holding onto your fealty tokens if you happen to generate them, and look for win cons that come in the form of synergy with fealty and marking. Okay, a couple other cards like Silver Talons that are not necessarily, they're kind of in this gray area between role players and signal post cards, are Silver Talons, like we covered already, and also Cut Through. Cut Through is a sick card. It says, if you've hit with a dagger this combat chain, which Cindra often is able to do because it's not efficient to block a 1-power attack most of the time. If you've hit with a dagger this combat chain, this gets +1 and go again. What do we want to say as Ninja? We want to say 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, as many times as humanly possible every single turn. Cut Through gives you a really easy way to do that. Only blocks 2, but that being said, it's got a really easy condition to meet. And it's just a really good card. So I wouldn't put it in role player because you can't depend, on getting a lot of these because it's a rare. But if you can get them in your deck, it's another way for you to go, yeah, I can make this Cindra deck work. I can make this Wrath of Retribution work. I lost it. We didn't actually go over Wrath of Retribution, but that's okay. Furthermore, let's talk about these. These are kind of in like the role player minus category. So these are the blood cards, I'm going to call them. We've got Bloodline and Blood Drop. Let me go ahead and pull up Blood Drop for you. Blood. Come on now. So I'm backtracking a little bit. I apologize for that, but this is the nature of freeform content, right? Okay, so this is the card that is in Alex's 3-0 deck. Bloodline. This is a 2-cost red, attacks for 3, blocks for 3. So what are we thinking immediately when we see those stats? Oh, it's another head jab. And it kind of sort of is. I'm sorry, the 2-cost doesn't really stipulate that, but the text on the card will signal head jab. It says, this costs 1 less to play for each Draconic chain link you control. Go again. Already got Go Again printed on it. Already got Draconic printed on it. But the downside of it is that you have to have 2 Draconic chain links for it to be that role player head jab that we want to see in Ninja decks. So that's why I give this role player minus in terms of its position in this limited format, because 9 times out of 10, you would so much rather have a Lava Vein Loyalty, because it has a lower downside, or a Ronin Renegade, because sure, it only blocks for 2 rather than 3, but it's got no downside to it whatsoever. Okay, so oftentimes this is a card that is a good include because you want a higher density of 3 blocks, but also it requires synergy with the rest of your deck. That's why I'm giving it the grade role player minus. It also comes in a slightly less powerful version, Blood Drop, which costs 1, has the same text on it. This costs 1 less to play for each Draconic chain link you control, has natural Go Again, but it's only got 2 power. So you've got another drawback in that it's essentially a yellow Lava Vein Loyalty a lot of the time, but it's another 3 block that can kind of fill your deck. It's filler, right? Cool. Let's also, since we're here and I have it pulled up, let's talk about another signpost card for Cindra. It's Blood Runs Deep. This one was spoiled very early on after the Hunted was kind of revealed to us. It says it costs 2. It's red, has 2 power. It's a Draconic Ninja attack, blocks 3, has natural Go Again. It says this costs 1 less to play for each Draconic chain link you control. When this attacks a hero, each dagger you control deals 1 damage to them. If damage is dealt this way, the dagger is hit. Destroy the daggers. Another example of true damage and potential game enders. Another one as well that does more than 1 true damage if you have the daggers equipped or on the combat chain. So another massive bomb in Cindra, even though it only comes in for 2. Effectively, if you have both of your daggers, it becomes 4 value, which again, we just want to say 4, 4, 4. And better yet, if we can split that damage. So overall, those are the main cards you want to look out for in Cindra. Let's see if we can talk about some of the traps. I would say that Tag the Target here, this is the head jab that marks on hit, making it just outright better than head jab, unless you're running the fist combo. Seeing a high density of these could perhaps hint that you should go into Cindra. I would say that is probably a false assumption. 9 times out of 10, you're going to want one of the Draconic cards rather than Tag the Target. Having a couple in the deck is never bad. However, thinking that you can get by with Tag the Target as like in your role player slot, like if I had as many Tag the Targets as Lava Vein Loyalties or Dust Runner Outlaws, or even Fire Tenant for Strike First for that matter, I don't necessarily think that is a sign that you can support a Cindra deck. So be careful about taking too many of those. Throw Yourself at Them is another one. It's a really cool card because it's got some true damage. And also, I think because Alex has it in the blue slot, that's a particularly good spot for it as well, because you can pitch it, or if you happen to find it super late in the game, you can use it as a way to close the game because it's got a flick effect written on it. But it isn't draconic, so you can't consistently go 3 or 4 chain links wide and then buy your daggers back if you're casting this every turn. Same goes with tag the target. Another one is pick up the point here. A very good card. It's got the new retrieve mechanic. When this attacks, you may retrieve a dagger from your graveyard. You have to pay 1 resource to equip it. It's got go again in it, and it's a cycle. It'll come in for 1, 2, and 3 respectively for blue, yellow, and red. Another card that can, I think, trick you into thinking that you are a Cindra deck. It's great to have a couple of them, but oftentimes what you want to be doing is going 3 draconic chain links wide and picking your daggers back up. In this case, it can make the math a little bit muddy. It also isn't draconic in its own. So just be careful. Not saying don't run it. Just make sure that you have your role players settled out first in terms of your ratios, and then see where they mix in. I want to mention these guys, as these are not in the role player category for Cindra. They're probably like a role player plus or like a extra support. They're on the same level as Silver Talons and Cut Through. These are the draconic defense reactions, and also Den of the Spider, the assassin / ninja defense reaction. Defense reactions in general are really, really sweet in this set to have in your sideboard. Smokeout says, when this defends a red card, mark the attacking hero. I love this card because it's really easy to pull off, unless you're going up against Fang, who swings with a lot of weapons. And if you can trigger this trap, it's a what am I trying to say? It's a mark that your opponent can't interact with, not like tag the target. It's a guaranteed mark. And if you're going to be marking your opponent, especially as Cindra, it's great to be able to guarantee it, because Cindra is going to be able to pop that mark and get her fealty token 100%. Just because she's a ninja and she has all these weird breakpoints. So, yeah, Alex has a really good deck here. It's no wonder that he 3-0'd. This is something that you are going to be wanting to replicate, definitely in your draft games, but also somewhat in your sealed games. I'm really curious to see what the power level is like in sealed versus draft. Generally speaking, you are going to be able to get a lot more powerful of a deck in draft because you have the choice of picking up certain cards or leaving them. Oftentimes in sealed, you just end up with like a lot of bananas or off-rate versions of your role players and that kind of thing. But that being said, because there are so many red cards in this set, I could see sealed being really, really powerful in comparison to draft. I'm curious to see how it shakes out. And especially maybe yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's just going to be harder to get your full equipment suite. Curious. Okay, cool. So we're going to move on from Cindra, unless anybody has any burning questions that they'd like to ask about Cindra Limited. I think we've covered the bases. We've covered what your role players are, the cards that should be filling your deck. We've covered signpost cards, cards that signal that you should be trying to build this hero, if at all possible. We've covered the equipment by and large. And we've also covered a couple traps for going into this deck. Cards that maybe look like they synergize really well, but actually provide a little bit of anti-synergy and make your hero ineffectual based on their overall game plan. Marcus Brown's in chat. Says, Bryce, good afternoon, mate. Good to see you, Marcus. Marcus is going to be joining me in the casting booth at the AGE West Open coming up on February 1st at Top Deck Keep. I can't wait because Marcus is such a pleasure to have in the booth. And also, I think I'm catching up to him in terms of beard length. So I've got that going for me too. So if you want to see two beards and a metaphor between us, then join us on the coverage side of things on YouTube, of course, at the Arcane Games and Events YouTube channel on February 1st. Marcus says he trimmed recently. I'm a big chat. Okay, cool. I am going to take the tiniest break because I do believe my boy is having a little bit of a difficulty settling during this afternoon nap. So I'm going to just go check in on him real quick. He's been great so far. I'm going to take 5, and then I will be back, and we will talk about Arakni. Don't go anywhere. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Thank you for your patience on that. I apparently just didn't understand the plan. I thought my wife went grocery shopping while the baby was napping, so I thought I was alone with him, but apparently she was here the whole time. Go figure. I don't know what's going on. But here's what is going on. We're going to get right back into this, pre-release precursor for you in just a moment. We're going to continue on with a 3-0 Arakni deck from Alex 4, the man himself. First, before we get into that, let's go ahead and do a quick set of midstream plugs. Let's start with AGE East. That is coming up on February 9th at Great Stories Comics and Gaming in Whitensville, Massachusetts. We're calling it an AGE Open, but it's a little different in that we are just bolstering Great Stories Road to Nationals event. So go to east.age.events. It'll lead you right to Great Stories website where you can just smash the add to cart button for a ticket to Great Stories RTN. The only difference between this and a normal RTN in terms of pricing is that we have AGE East points on the line to qualify for the first ever East Players Championship. Otherwise, it's your normal RTN pricing, the invitation to nationals, the gold cold foil, the mats, etc. And then the only other difference besides that is that, of course, Arcane Games and Events will be streaming it. We'll have Justin on site. I will be back here at our home base studio in LA, casting the event for you from the comfort of Justin's couch. Next up, join our Discord. That's discord.age.events for all the reasons listed on your screen. Also, if you happen to have extra time or funds or things that would be useful to people that have been affected by the wildfires here in Los Angeles, we've compiled a list of reputable places to donate and to volunteer at SoCalHelp.age.events. Check that out if you are inclined and able to help out. Next up, the Arcane Games and Events Pro Team is going to be streaming once again after our little hiatus during the holidays and the World Championships in Osaka. The boys are really excited to get back on your screens, and so am I. I'm happy to be here right now, and I know they will be once they kick it into gear as well. Look out. We got more anti-meta Anthony, got more Joshua Rath, and all the boys here at Arcane Games and Events. Next, of course, is the continuing Arcane Games and Events Open Series. We're plugging away on the West Coast as well as the East. We got another event coming at you on February 1st, and it's a hunted draft at Top Deck Keep in Riverside, California. Okay, now that housekeeping is out of the way, let's get back into the main topic, which is, of course, the hunted heroes and what they look like in Limited. Next up is Arakni Web of Deceit, which is such a fearsome hero. His CC form, Arakni Marionette, I'm sure is going to be making some serious waves. He's a Chaos Assassin hero. His text goes a little something like this. Your attacks with stealth that are attacking a marked hero get +1, and when this hits, this gets go again. At the beginning of your end phase, if an opponent is marked, you become a random agent of chaos. So, without going any further, it's important to say that Arakni is probably the most complicated hero to pilot in this set. Honestly, when I first saw all of them spoiled, I didn't think that would be the case based on his hero text and based on the Agents of Chaos, but managing your marks and your weapons is really difficult. It takes a lot of brain power, and the playlines are not always obvious. So we're going to talk about the ways it can get muddy and the pitfalls to look out for as we go over this deck and what cards it's comprised of or should be comprised of. First, let's ingest this hero text one more time. Your attacks with stealth that are attacking a marked hero get +1, and when this hits, it gets go again. At the beginning of your end phase, if an opponent is marked, you become a random agent of chaos. Cool. Let's go over the Agents of Chaos one by one. I know these have been spoiled for a long time, so I'm not going to waste your time too much with reading them back and forth, but it is important to keep them in mind. Now, when you become a random agent of chaos, you're probably going to roll a 6-sided die. Luckily enough, LSS has listed a number in Roman numerals on each one of these agents of chaos, so you can very simply just roll the die and flip to the one on the die. Be cognizant of that as you move through your sealed games. You don't want to be wasting time in the round trying to figure out which agent of chaos you should be. If you're playing Arakni, familiarize yourself with which one is which and have a plan for transforming as you go. That's just a little craftsman tip approaching limited in general. Okay, number 1 is Arakni Black Widow. One of the better ones, I would say. Once per turn attack reaction, discard an assassin card. Target assassin attack gets +3. If it has stealth, it gets when this hits a hero, they banish a card from their hand. At the beginning of the end phase, return to the Brood, which means revert back to Web of Deceit. Next up, Arakni Funnel Web. Same exact deal as Black Widow, only if the attack has stealth, it gets when this hits a hero, banish a card in their arsenal. Arsenal versus hand. Otherwise, exactly the same text. Arakni Orb Weaver is number 3. Graphene Calicera cost you 1 less to activate. That is a token weapon. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up now so we have this in mind. Graphene Calicera has stealth. It's a weapon that has stealth. Also a dagger, so it can be flicked. It can be powered up by things that power up stealth attacks. It also says, once per turn action, 1 resource, attack with 1 power. When this attacks a marked hero, the attack gets go again. Cool. So if your opponent is marked, this has go again. Awesome. Arakni Orb Weaver says that weapon swing is free. Costs 1 less to activate. Normally it costs 1. Arakni Orb Weaver also says once per turn instant. Keep that in mind. 1 per turn instant, not attack reaction, because there are a lot of things that care about attack reactions in this set. Once per turn instant, discard an assassin card. Equip a Graphene Calicera token. Your next attack with stealth this turn gets +3. This is a really interesting Chaos Hero because a lot of the other ones are giving you a numerical advantage of 3. They're providing 3 offensive value. Arakni Orb Weaver, I would insist, for the cost of discarding an assassin card, gives you 4 go again value if the opponent's marked. So it's 4 no matter what. Important to mention, you get kind of +1 value on Orb Weaver as opposed to some of the other ones. Okay, cool. Moving on. Number 4, Arakni Redback. One of the weaker ones, if you can believe it. It says, once per turn attack reaction, discard an assassin card. Target assassin attack gets +3. If it has stealth, it gets go again. So this can allow you to plan for wider turns than you otherwise would be able to in Assassin, but as you'll see as you move through this limited format, more often than not, the Assassin play pattern style is usually block with 2 cards, send 2 cards. So in fringe scenarios, you can make use of Arakni Redback, although I would say the majority of the time I would be a little disappointed if I transform into Arakni Redback. Okay, so that's the go wide guy. Number 5, Arakni Tarantula is pretty fearsome. Whenever a dagger you own hits a hero, they lose 1 life. That includes when you flick those daggers at people. Once per turn attack reaction, discard an assassin card, target dagger gets +3. At the beginning of your end phase, return to the Brood, just like the rest of them. So this one can get a little annoying because it might force your opponent to make really annoying, inefficient blocks in the end game especially. Number 6, possibly the best one, I think. Arakni Trap Door. When you become this, you may search your deck for a card. You may search your deck for any card and banish it face down. Keep that in mind. Then shuffle. If it's a trap, you may play it until the start of your next turn. So in fringe cases, you can use this ability to just remove weak cards from your deck and also mind game your opponent. Because Assassin has access to a lot of traps in this limited format, I think your deck is probably going to end up with some. And I think you should definitely have them in your deck because they're super powerful. So this is the only Agent of Chaos that just says gain an extra card, right? All of the other ones force you to discard a card, which essentially transforms the card into a +3 attack reaction or some other effect. Usually it's a +3. We talked about Orb Weaver kind of sort of being a +4 if you're able to equip that Graphene Calycera. This one just says get a card that you can play during your next turn. Absolutely bonkers. And it also synergizes incredibly well with the way you transform. Oftentimes, if you have marked your opponent, say by like swinging your dagger and destroying it, which we'll go over in a second, and past, you haven't put a lot of pressure on your opponent. So they could potentially be going into a situation where they have the tempo and a lot of cards that they have access to, and then you become Arakni Trapdoor. All of a sudden, instead of having to block with 2 cards, you can maybe block with 1 card from hand and then the trap. Or if it's just a situation where you have to be blocking out, you have 1 more card to do that. And potentially you could send 1 card with stealth at the beginning of your next turn, or swing your dagger, remark your opponent, whatever. Honestly, I think Arakni Trapdoor might be the best transformation possible. That being said, it has the downside of maybe not being great if you are on the front foot. If you stripped all the cards away from your opponent, maybe it's not best to banish a card from your hand. But in a lot of situations, I'm really happy to see Arakni Trapdoor. I'm really happy to see myself rolling a 6 on that die. Okay, cool. So that's kind of what's at stake when you're choosing whether or not to leave an opponent marked at the end of the turn or not. And this is a situation that you're going to run into a lot, because as Web of Deceit, you are incentivized to attack your opponents when they're marked, because your stealth cards are going to now come in for breakpoints if they're red, and also get on hit go again. But by swinging at your opponent, you are often threatening the consumption of that mark, which then means you don't transform. So this is also a skill point for when you're playing against Arakni. You need to identify moments where you can allow them to consume the mark that's on you when you're not going to get that much downside. So it's tricky. You're incentivized to attack heroes that are marked, but you only transform and become some of these powerful demi heroes if they are marked at the end of the turn. Talk about some of the play patterns you can get into a little bit later, but this is the main dichotomy that you're facing in terms of like your decisions as you're playing this deck. Be aware of it. Now, let's talk about the weapons real quick, because the interplay with this and the turn cycle dilemma that I just described is kind of case in point. Mark of the Huntsman, once per turn, action, pay 2 resources, attack, go again. This looks a lot like other Assassin Daggers, except for a couple things. Number 1, no piercing on this dagger. When this hits a hero, you may choose to destroy this and mark them. That's another difference. And then, if this is attacking a marked hero, this gets +1. So instead of coming in for 1 go again, it comes in for 2 go again. So you're going to be destroying these daggers during your games as Arakni. The chances of you swinging with both of these daggers in one turn, unlike, Blossoming Mistblade or Scale Peeler or Spider's Bite, like we see in some of our more traditional Assassin friends in CC and also in Limited, you're very rarely going to be swinging both of these in one turn. So it is okay to let go of one of them in potentially the early game or the mid game. You just have to be aware of how many effects you have that allow you to pick it back up again, or perhaps equip this token weapon, Graphene Calycera, in its place. So don't be afraid to go down to 1 dagger. Do perhaps be afraid to go down to 0 daggers, especially if you have no way to pick them up. But this is the primary way that you are going to mark your opponent, because it is often not effective to block with a card on a dagger. And so you'll probably get your mark this way, at least to get your engine going. And just so that ties into like, okay, when I sacrifice this resource, this weapon for a mark, I want to be very aware of what I'm actually trying to do with the mark. Because this has go again, oftentimes I will want to follow up with something. If I follow up with something, I might consume that mark. And was the point of me marking my opponent to make it so that I could transform at the end of my turn? Or was the mark there to maybe power up one of my stealth attacks that gets an extra bit of power if my opponent is marked? So ask yourself that question. When you're thinking about marking your opponent by consuming one of your daggers or otherwise, ask yourself why you're doing it and if it's actually the right course of action. Because if you're just I think the biggest trap you can fall into is just wanting to transform into one of the demi-heroes at every possible turn, when really, Arakni Web of Deceit's text is pretty dang good. Like the fact that stealth cards with really nasty on-hits, like Mark of the Black Widow, come in for breakpoints all of a sudden, it's a pretty nice hero text. So don't transform just to transform, is my point, and be very considerate of what you want to do with your marks. Cool. Moving on in the rest of the equipment suite that Alex has shown us here, we got Danger Digits, which we talked about in the Cindra deck. This is a little bit of inevitability at the end of the game. It is perhaps not as important in that regard for Arakni. I think Arakni does have that at his disposal. Like your opponent can't go to 1, and that's a really cool way to make somebody play. But it also has this effect of being an on-demand mark when you really need it. So oftentimes, if you're using that mark effectively with Arakni Web of Deceit's hero text, you can trade this Danger Digits in for 2 value instead of 1, like Cindra does, because you flick Mark of the Huntsman, you mark your opponent, and then you come in with a stealth attack that gets buffed because of Arakni Web of Deceit. Otherwise, Alex has the Assassin Warrior set of equipment called Red Alert Boots. I really like these. The entire Red Alert suite says if an attack reaction has been played or activated this chain link, this gets +1 defense. I like this a lot, and it also has Blade Break, I should mention. I like this a lot for blocking the first dagger that Fang sends at you, because oftentimes he has to play an attack reaction in order for it to get go again. That being said, they really like to use these sidestep cards, like Tooth of the Dragon, which is an instant, not a reaction. So it wouldn't buff Red Alert Boots, but if it was a reaction that they had in their hand, you would block it out entirely. That's the way I feel about Red Alert Boots. It's a really nice way to block that first Fang chain link. It also is really nice if you happen to not block the first dagger, to let's say you're in a situation where you're worried about a Fang closing out the game by using an attack reaction on the second dagger. That is, maybe you are thinking about, oh, can I block this just with my equipment and stay alive or whatever? Like, oftentimes you can just put it out there as assurance that you won't die on the turn, and maybe you can close it out when the tempo is passed back to you, which sometimes can encourage a Fang to just kind of tuck an attack reaction into arsenal instead. But I would argue at that point it has done its duty anyway. I'm rambling a little bit, but I think that makes sense. I hope it does. Let's go ahead and make a personal copy of this deck as well so that I can talk about the other equipment that Arakni has access to. We've got the Leapfrog legs. The Leapfrog outfit, let's call it, which we saw in Alex's Cindra deck. This is also accessible to Assassin. I would argue that Red Alert is just plain better because, yeah, Slime Skin can be put on a combat chain where there's a reaction, but I would argue the potential upside for +1 defense is perhaps more desirable. Let's also talk about, what are the boots called? Starting Point. So Starting Point is the extra common Assassin Warrior equipment. It says attack reaction, destroy this, target attack gets go again. Activate this ability only if you've played a card or activated an ability this reaction step. I do think this is better in Fang in general. I think you would be hard-pressed to convince me that you should take these in Arakni over Red Alert boots. But we'll go over that when we touch on Fang a little bit later. Okay, moving on to the deck itself. Let's talk about role players. First, these are the cards, again, that are going to be the bread and butter of the deck. They're not necessarily the signal post cards that get you into the class, but they're the ones that make it function and hum like a V8. Let's talk first about Mark of the Black Widow. You're going to see a lot of these cards that harken back to the demi-heroes, and usually the stealth cards are going to have an effect that mirrors what the demi-heroes do. So if you're having a hard time keeping the names straight in your head, this can be a shortcut to analyzing whether or not these cards are good for you. So, for example, I'm going to make this connection once, and then I'll allow you to do it from then on because it'll be time consuming. Mark of the Black Widow is a 0 cost. In the red, it comes in for 3, blocks for 3, has stealth. When this hits a marked hero, they banish a card from their hand. So that is one of those payoffs that we've been talking about. Like, why am I marking this hero? If I am marking this hero to banish a card from their hand or force them to block, otherwise I will banish a card from their hand, that's a pretty good effect. That's a mark that is being used for good value. Okay. And then if your opponent, say, blocks it out, maybe you're not upset with the quote unquote plan B of transforming into a demi-hero. Okay. So this card is an example of something that fits into either side of the decision point. Do I swing at this marked hero or not? Right? Okay, so Mark of the Black Widow. Now let's read the demi-hero one more time. Oh my gosh. Black Widow. Let's see if I can find the... Oh, that's so frustrating. Because I'm in edit mode. Okay, I'll just go into cards mode. And there we go. Okay, Arakni Black Widow says, once per turn attack reaction, discard an assassin card. Target assassin attack gets +3. If it has stealth, it gets, when this hits a hero, they banish a card from their hand. So, this is cool because your opponent doesn't have to be marked like it does on the stealth attack action card. But the point of doing this exercise is to tell you that, like, oh, if I'm flicking through cards really quick, I see Mark of the Black Widow, I automatically should know what that card does as its on-hit effect if I know if I am familiar with the demi-heroes. It's all about creating shortcuts, especially in these time-sensitive deck-building situations, right? I think that's a super useful shorthand for pre-releases and draft and sealed alike. I hope that you find it useful as well. It's also really helpful as like a mnemonic device for casting, as a side note, especially when you're trying to learn all these cards right after they came out and you're about to cast an event. So that's the way I like to analyze it. Okay, so we're talking about this in the context of how does it compare to the demi-hero, but the reason we started this conversation is because we're talking about role players in this deck. Mark of the Black Widow is a role player for a lot of obvious reasons. If you are Arakni Web of Deceit and you're buffing up your stealth cards that are targeting marked heroes, I can't think of a better one to swing at them with a breakpoint at 4, potentially go again, then one that banishes a card from their hand. Okay. For that reason, Mark of the Black Widow is a really good stealth card in Arakni. Honestly, this is one that I would call a role player and is bleeding into like Signpost. If you're seeing this card pop up, maybe Arakni is the hero for you. Next up is Mark of the Funnel Web, which pairs with Arakni Funnel Web, if you can believe it, because when it hits a marked hero, they banish a card in their arsenal. Another solid role player. In the limited format, you're going to have a lot of situations where your opponent plays against you with a cleared arsenal, especially if they know what they're doing against Arakni. A lot of the times, it'll also be a defense reaction because there are plenty of defense reactions in this set, which is why I would definitely say that Mark of the Black Widow is the more desirable card over Funnel Web, but still a good role player. Now, the next one we're going to move on to deviates from this whole mirroring the demi-heroes thing, but I think it's for good reason because Mark the Prey is a really, really good role player in Arakni. You want a good number of these cards in your deck if you can manage to pick them up. And I'll explain why. Mark the Prey says stealth. When this hits a hero, mark them. Comes in for 3 at red and blocks for 3. Now, a little bit of context. It's important to know that there's no weirdness with the way the triggers work. And, well, I don't know. Depending on what side of the fence you're on, you could think this is weird or you could not. If my opponent is already marked and I am attacking them with something that says on hit, mark them, 2 things are going to happen when I hit them. The mark will be consumed, and any effects that trigger on consuming a mark will happen, but also they will get remarked. And there's no way the opponent can reorder the triggers to make that not happen. So, if you have the question in your mind while you're at a pre-release, like sitting down for your first game going, oh crap, if I hit them, will I have to make a judge call about like remark? No. That's not how it works. If you're going to mark them and they're already marked and you hit them, they will remain marked, which is why Mark the Prey is such a good card because it allows you to take advantage of this really cool text on Arakni Web of Deceit. It'll come in for a breakpoint and potentially get go again, and it'll also leave the mark on the opponent. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, right? You get to benefit from attacking a marked hero, and you get to leave them marked to potentially transform into Arakni Web of Deceit. Transform into one of the demi-heroes. Or I'm thinking about a situation where, let's say I start my turn, the opponent is marked, I've blocked with 2 cards, I have nothing in my arsenal, I can swing Mark the Prey for a breakpoint with go again, and then if they happen to let it hit, I could come in with Mark of the Black Widow for a breakpoint. If they block it out, they're technically still marked, and I can follow that same line of thinking. Or if I'm afraid they'll just throw 2 more cards in front of it, or if they have a piece of equipment, I could pocket this for later, transform into one of the demi-heroes, and potentially be able to pump this up on demand. Pretty good turn cycle. Next up is Plunge the Prospect, another fantastic card because it gets buffed by itself when attacking a marked hero. Now, if you are Web of Deceit, that means this becomes a 0 for 5 when attacking a marked hero, which is really nasty. And even if you, we talked about yellow cards actually being kind of good in this limited format at certain times. Plunge the Prospect yellow is really sweet because when you're Web of Deceit, it comes in for a breakpoint, and also it has a dual function of being able to pitch to your daggers. Oftentimes, a yellow card is actually enough resources to get through a turn, unless you happen to be sitting on one of those 1-cost reactions that are going to be in high demand in Assassin. But most of the time, what you're going to be doing is swing a dagger, come in with a 0-cost stealth attack. And Plunge the Prospect yellow allows you to do that and is a breakpoint at yellow, which is, insane. So Plunge the Prospect, another solid card. Probably not that great in a blue, because when you're Web of Deceit, it'll come in for 3. Not really where you want to be. But yeah, another solid role player. Since we're talking about cards that can be used as resources, let's jump over to Reaper's Call. Reaper's Call is just solid because it's on-demand marking, usually that your opponent can't really interact with unless they have a defense reaction. It's often nice to be able to do this turn 0 as well, especially if your opponent doesn't, say your opponent is on the play, they don't have a whole lot of gas that comes at you, they don't demand you to block, which, by the way, if they do demand that you block and they kind of vomit their hand at you, this thing blocks for 3, also insane. And then let's say they move to Arsenal, you discard this. It's exactly like the windups were in heavy hitters. It's except for the fact that it blocks 3, which makes it even better. So if you can fill your resource cards out with Reaper's Calls, you're in a good place. You're in a good place. It's not the greatest in red because it, besides having stealth, it's not really coming in for any special on hits or anything like that. But as a resource card, kind of insane. Let's talk about, oh yeah, we're still on role players. Let's move into attack reactions, right? So Razor's Edge is probably one of the bigger ones this set. If you can get 2 or 3 of these, you're going to be in a happy place because you don't feel bad about blocking with one of them. But this is a potential game ender right there, or tempo swinger for sure, especially if you're attacking a marked hero with Mark of the Black Widow or Mark of the Funnel Web. So I would call these role players as well, Razor's Edge, and also potentially Scar Tissue, which gives another possible uninteractable form of mark and a little bit of ending the game inevitability on top of it. So I think that about rounds out our role players. You could possibly, yeah, no, I'm not gonna mix Orb Weaver Spinneret in with the role players. I think let's also say that all of the common defense reactions, traps, are role players as well. I do think if you want a good Arakni deck, you should at least be prepared for Arakni Trapdoor to get you some benefit, because, like I said, I think it's one of the stronger demi-heroes. You should have defense reactions in your Arakni deck. Like, they have access to so many of them. There's this one, which is an Assassin Warrior defense reaction. There's also Hunted or Hunter, which is just for the assassins. There is also an Assassin Ninja one called Lair of the Spider. And 2 out of 3 of them are going to mark the opposing hero. In case you haven't figured it out yet, you just want to be marking the opposing hero as much as you can, because you're inevitably going to find yourself in a situation where you have to consume a mark, even though it's not going to get you anything, and you want to be able to remark them as soon as possible. Also, the defense reactions marking an opponent on their turn is insane, because you're often going to be in a situation where you are Web of Deceit and you can take advantage of it, just going straight on into your next turn without even swinging one of your daggers. Maybe you just want to do a Cheerios turn instead of swinging the dagger and then going into something, because it's, pitching a card for 1 damage is not super efficient unless you're getting something else out of it. Okay, so defense reactions are role players. Let's move into role player pluses. Okay, let's talk about cards that don't necessarily have to be in the deck, but are doing good things for it. First up is Orb Weaver Spinneret, which is not an attack with stealth, but it does harken back to one of the demi-heroes, the Orb Weaver. And, of course, it does something very similar to what she does. Equip a Graphene Calycera token. It's important to mention this is not an attack. This is an action with Go Again. Non-attack action. Equip a Graphene Calycera token. Your next attack with stealth this turn gets X, which is its color. So The red one will give it +3, the yellow gives +2, the blue gives +1. This card is super cool for making use of your open dagger slots. Having these in your deck make it so that you don't have to think twice about consuming one of your daggers early and using those marks. Because oftentimes you are, especially early on in the game, before you've gotten to resolve your defense reactions or swing in with weapons, like the dagger is just the most reliable way to provide that first mark. And if you can do it without thinking twice about destroying your dagger, more power to you. Having one of these orb weavers in your deck means that at some point you will be able to refill that dagger slot with something that is oftentimes a little bit better when you're just trying to close the game in terms of damage. So that's kind of a role player plus. Next up is Bite, which is another one of those cards like Reaper's Call that you really just want in your resource base, because it says on it, stealth. When this attacks a hero, you may have a dagger. When it attacks, not when this hits. When this attacks a hero, you may have a dagger you control deal 1 damage to them. If damage is dealt this way, the dagger is hit, destroy the dagger. So the reason we want this in our resource base is because we want to be pitching this card first and second cycle of the game if it's going to go that long. And then when it's really getting grindy towards the end and your opponent is on that last point of life, you can actually resolve this card and close out the game that way. If you happen to be lucky enough to be wearing danger digits, it means your opponent is at 0 life when they're at 2 life instead. Pretty cool effect. Also, if you are just so desperate for a mark, you can use this to huck one of your daggers and consume the Mark of the Huntsman in order to get a mark. So role player plus, but only in the yellow and blue. Another role player plus is Incision. It's at the common rarity, so it should be milling about, but like in draft, it's going to be picked up pretty highly, so you can't expect to get a lot of them. If you happen to open a lot of them in sealed, I could see it being, based not as good as Razor's Edge, because oftentimes the things that we actually want to push through for their on hits are the cards, not the daggers, but Incisions can close out games, and ultimately that's what we're here to do, is win the game. Next up is Whittle from Bone. Stealth. When this attacks a marked hero, equip a Graphene Calycera token. Which is cool because when you are Web of Deceit and you have one of these in the red, you can come in for 4, potentially go again. If they happen to block it out, the mark remains on them, and then you can swing the Graphene Calycera, which will naturally have go again because that's what it says on the card. Or, it's just another, it's kind of like Orb Weaver Spinneret in that it is another reason that you don't have to be scared about consuming your Mark of the Huntsman early on, which we want to be doing. Pick Up the Point is another good one. I would insist that this is potentially better in Assassin over, I don't know. It's honestly kind of a toss-up whether this is better in Assassin or Ninja, because Cindra has natural ways to get her daggers back. Arakni often relies on other cards' effects. But this is another role player plus. It does have the downside of being a 2-block. And in Assassin, you definitely want your block density, your overall block power in your deck to be higher than you do in Ninja. It's just inherently part of Ninja that you're going to have 2 blocks. Not so with Arakni. You can absolutely get a draft deck together with all 3 blocks. Teammate John Zapata did it just last night. I'm going to throw in Extinguish the Flames and its cohort card. Defang the Dragon into role player plus. And with the caveat that it is a trap for people that are using it as a reason to play Arakni. So, excuse me, quick sip of Joe. Defang the Dragon is a 0-cost stealth card. Power is 3, only comes in red, defense for 3. It says stealth. Contract. You're contracted to hit a marked hero named Fang. Whenever you complete this contract, draw a card. And extinguish the flames is the exact same wording, except it says you are contracted to hit a marked hero named Cindra. So I think one of the reasons that people fall into the trap of thinking that this card being in my pool means I need to play Arakni is because the art is so dope. And it's got that like extended part to it. It just makes it look prettier than other cards. And while art is super fun, it is not usually a reason to go into a particular hero. It also has a lot of conditions to it. You've got to be playing against the proper opposing hero in order for it to be beneficial to you. That hero has to be marked, and you have to be able to make use of that drawn card. A lot of the time people see, oh, I get to draw a card, and don't think about, what am I going to do with that card? If you happen to be... I would also insist that part of the condition you have to meet when you're resolving one of these cards is that you also have to be in Arakni Web of Deceit. Because if you're not, it's oftentimes a really easy thing for your opponent to block. You really want the break point when you're resolving this card. So it's a lot of things to juggle, and it's surprisingly a lot harder to figure out the right time to resolve it than you would think. So these cards are great to have when you happen to be facing the hero that is named on them. But a lot of the time, 2/3 of the time, they're going to be sideboard cards. So don't use this as a reason to say, I want to play Arakni. Use them as useful tools in the right situation. I guess we're going to move... another role player plus that you can't expect to see a lot because... Oh, what? Is it common now? Is backstab in the common slot? I thought it was still in the rare slot. I was about to say you won't see a lot of backstabs because it's rare. It might have only been rare in Outsiders. Maybe it's common now. I haven't seen a lot of these floating around when I do the Runaways drafts. So I feel like it's a role player plus because it's going to get picked up really quickly. Maybe I'm mistaken about that, though. The passive line of text on this, defense reactions can't be played to this chain link, is pretty sick because every single hero in this limited format has access to defense reactions. Being able to turn them off, especially against, I would imagine, in the Assassin Mirror, is really nice. That about wraps up Role Player and Role Player Plus, I think. I'm seeing a couple traps from what I'm seeing in Alex's deck, so let's go over those. Number one could be Expose. Expose is really, it's a cool toolkit card, but not having any block value is a massive, massive downside in Assassin. This is not a trap in that I don't think anybody's going to see this card and be like, oh my gosh, I have to play Assassin because I have Exposed. But it might be a trap to run, especially if you have a lot of other ways to close out the game, like some throw yourself at thems, your danger digits, your Razor's Edge, etc. It's also kind of a trap because Alex and I were talking about this last night. You don't actually need that many blues in these Arakni decks. Like, look, he's running 6, which is much lower than we typically see in Assassin decks, especially because they have a lot of powerful blues in CC nowadays. Oftentimes, like we said, we're going to be pitching a resource card. We would insist that it can be a yellow because we're just going to swing one of our 2-cost daggers and go into a stealth attack. Oftentimes, the attack reactions that we have at our disposal are 0 costs. There are some exceptions, like 2 Sides of the Blade, which is a 1 cost, giving it a bit of a downside because it doesn't fit that turn cycle that I just described. But oftentimes you're going to be able to get away with just a yellow. So Exposed, I'm calling a trap because it is a blue that is uninteractable mark, but you don't actually need that many blues. So maybe getting something that doesn't block for anything is not super advantageous to you. So yeah, I talked about why I think maybe Extinguish the Flames or Defang the Dragon could be a trap as well. Let's talk about Scuttle the Canal. Scuttle the Canal is one of those stealth cards. It kind of lines up with Orb-Weaver. I think that's the character depicted on the card. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a generic random assassin person. Orb-Weaver was who I thought of when I saw the art, though. But Scuttle the Canal says stealth. In this case, it's a blue, but it comes in the normal stealth attack cycle, yellow and red as well. In the red, it comes in for 3, yellow 2, blue 1. When this attacks a marked hero, this gets go again. Now, I think this is a trap to run in the red because of the thing I alluded to earlier, just that you're oftentimes not going to be going super wide as Assassin. So anything that encourages you to do so, and more importantly, encourages you to hold on to cards and not block when you probably should be, is a trap. Like Assassin numbers in general, unless you are coming in for breakpoints and that kind of thing, are not going to measure up to Fang and Ninja. They're just going to be able to put out more breakpoints on offense than you are. So I would encourage you to not run these in the red, and don't plan for situations where you're going to be going wide. It's much more often the case that you will want to block with 2 cards, maybe pitch 1 to a dagger if you happen to have it extra, come in with a stealth attack, and transform at the end of your turn, or maybe instead of that pitch card going to a dagger, maybe it's one of your 0-cost reactions like Razor's Edge, and you'll just send a 2-card 7 if you're Web of Deceit and they happen to be marked, that kind of thing. Also, because you have access to so many defense reactions, you have to plan for situations where you're going to be using cards on defense. So Scuttle the Canal is one of those traps. Let's go HNT. Yeah, cool. Cut through might be a trap in Arakni because more often than not, your daggers cost 2, not 1. So you can get yourself in a situation where you convince yourself that getting the +1 and go again on this card is worth swinging a dagger, when oftentimes that just makes it into a 2-card 5. And maybe you can't make use of that last resource because a lot of your stuff costs 0. So I would say proceed with caution on cut through. Cut from the same cloth is not a trap because that's a 0 for 4 on its face. I think it also has some massive upside because you reveal your opponent's hand, and if they have an attack reaction, you mark them. I don't think that is necessarily a trap. It is a 2-block, so be careful. Tread lightly. I'm going to pivot a little bit because we didn't go over the rare set of equipment, which is generic. So everybody has access to this, putting a bigger pile on my point that you should have your full equipment suite, especially if you're drafting in this set, because there's just, like, you can have packs with 3 equipment in them, and you should be able to pick them up. These, I would say, are worth their rarity. They are rare instead of common, like all the other limited equipment. They say, every single one of them says, this gets +1 defense while defending a weapon attack. It already has 1 defense, and it has the keyword guard well. So the way this works is you essentially have 2 options with this card. The first option is to block a weapon. It'll get +1, and then when the combat chain closes, it'll get 2 -1 counters on it. So you can block for 1 instance of 2, or you can block an attack action card first. It'll get 1 -1 counter on it, bringing it down to 0. Then you can block a weapon attack with it, which will essentially negate the -1 counter that's on it, bring it back up to 1. So you get 2 blocks of 1 or 1 block of 2. Either way, you're getting 2 defensive value out of this equipment, which is more than you can say for most of the other equipment pieces in this set, with the exception, of course, of Red Alert boots. The Red Alert outfit, but that is contingent on your opponent playing an attack reaction, which, I mean, even at its outset, if you're playing against Cindra, that's just never going to happen. Blade Beckoner Helm even against Cindra is always going to get 2 points of defensive value. Glad we pivoted there. Let me see if I can find any other traps or perhaps signpost cards. We haven't talked about signpost cards yet either. Pain in the Backside is honestly probably a signpost card, like get into Arakni. Poison Blade. I think Poison Blade is definitely a trap in Assassin. It can be a game ender or like have a turn cycle where it makes things so awkward for your opponent that they block badly and give you tempo. That being said, your daggers are so expensive and you want to be consuming them a lot. So you need to play this deck as though you have to be comfortable playing this deck as though you have one dagger and one equipment slot empty. So having a card that encourages you to swing your daggers a lot and go super wide. In general, the lesson is anything that encourages you to go wide as Assassin in this limited set is maybe not the way to go. That being said, I'm sure there's a variant of Arakni that is 100% dagger focused. Brian Gottlieb alluded to it during the stream in Prague. But if we're talking about basics of the Hunted Limited format, be careful of this card. Be careful of doing things that encourage you to swing your daggers as Assassin because inherently they are below rate. You're paying 2 resources for 1 damage. In this case, if it hits, it's 2, but also Poison Blade blocks for 2, so you're bringing down the block value of your deck in general. Just be careful. Savor Bloodshed. Savor Bloodshed is a sick card for Classic Constructed for sure. I'm really excited to see what this card does in Assassin and Warrior. But it's a 0 for 4 on its face. It also has massive upside. The next time you hit a marked hero with a dagger this turn, draw a card. It's a non-attack action. Blocks for 3. Only comes in red because it's a Majestic. I would say this is probably a signpost card for being an Assassin or Warrior for that matter in Limited. Any other signpost cards? Tarantula Toxin. Tarantula Toxin is an amazing card. It's at its best when it's paired with another signpost card, which... Did I miss it? Kiss of Death is the card I'm alluding to. Kiss of Death is the stealth attack action card that's also a dagger. So if you're able to resolve a Tarantula Toxin on a Kiss of Death, it gets both modes. But Tarantula Toxin is already insane in the limited format because it's got dual purpose. It costs 0. It blocks for 3. It's an attack reaction. It can be a game ender. It's basically a Razor it's a Razor's Edge that works on both daggers and attack action cards, because it's giving the subtraction on defense for the attack action cards, or it is giving the +3 on a dagger. So this is just a really reliable way to close out games. That is a signpost card for Arakni for sure. Up, Sticks, and Run is probably another one of those signpost cards. More for Assassin, I'd say. I'm sorry, more for Ninja, I would say, than Assassin. Maybe it's a role player plus, actually. I don't know if it's necessarily a signpost card. The other signpost card that I talked about a little bit with Tarantula Toxin is Kiss of Death. There it is. That's what that looks like. Kiss of Death is the one that Max Ferocity spoiled and did her cosplay for. So if you see something that looks like Max Ferocity's cosplay, that's a signpost card for Assassin. Get into Assassin with this. It's insane because not only does it have that dual purpose with Tarantula Toxin and a bunch of other cards, it also has stealth. It also says when this hits a hero, they lose 1 life. Also, because it's a dagger, you can flick it. So you could have a situation where your Arakni Web of Deceit, you swing Kiss of Death against a marked hero. It comes in for a breakpoint. They block for 3. They lose 2 life because of the 1 from the buff power of Arakni Web of Deceit, and also 1 from the lose a life clause on Kiss of Death itself. Then you go to your next chain link. I don't know, just send another stealth card, whatever. And then you hit Danger Digits. Destroy this target dagger you control that isn't on the active chain link, deals 1 damage to the defending hero. So it says on here, the dagger has hit, destroy the dagger. So Kiss of Death would hit again, deal 1 damage for the dagger digits, and then they would also lose 1 life because it says whenever this hits a hero, they lose 1 life. This card's insane. Absolutely insane. That's a signpost card. Ba-ba-dum-bum-bum-bum-bum. That's the broad strokes. Oh, Take a Stab is definitely a trap for Arakni. There's no way you're going to be wanting to swing daggers for an additional time. I would say, honestly, it's not even that great in Fang because it's not Draconic. The only good thing about it is that it is a reaction speed +3. It blocks 2 as well. Be careful of that card. That card's a trap. I think To the Point is another Assassin Warrior attack reaction. I don't think this one's a trap, but I also don't think it's like it's not a role player. It's like I would call it like a one of good stuff. Like it's nice to be able to depend on this coming around at some point. Target dagger attack gets +3. If the defending hero is marked, instead it gets +4. Again, you kind of fall into the trap in Assassin where you pitch a card just to swing a dagger so you can play this. And effectively, you're doing a 2-card 5 most of the time. I guess if they're marked and you're swinging Mark of the Huntsman, you're doing a 2-card 6, but that's not that great. So be careful when using this card. It's great. Maybe it's great as a one of because I like it as like a game ender. It's really nice to have something that you can rely on coming around in your deck that will take your opponent from, 3 or 4 to 0. So for that, it's good. Don't pack too many of these because you're going to have to use them on inefficient daggers. Be careful. That gets us into the yellows. So I feel pretty confident that we've covered most of it for Assassin. Perforate is a majestic that says you may attack with a dagger an additional time, and its attack costs you 1 less to activate this turn. This is probably more of a Fang card because it makes the dagger free. Also draw a card. It replaces itself, but it costs 1. Honestly, I don't think it's a signpost card for either of them. Maybe it's like a nice to have potentially. But like in Fang, you can only reliably know that this is going to get only 1 offensive value because you need a lot of, like, the chances of you have to be comfortable not drawing a Draconic attack reaction off of this. Yeah. So we're gonna put that not in trap, like maybe a nice to have, not a signpost card though. Not like I'm gonna build an assassin or warrior deck around it. Take Up the Mantle. That's a signpost card for Arakni. I had a situation against Evan Bridges the other night where he came in with some blue stealth attack, I think it was, and then he goes, I think I was marked. So he goes, Take Up the Mantle, give it +3, and then switch it out for a Mark of the Black Widow. And so because I was marked, Web of Deceit gave it +1. So we're sitting at 4 + 3 is 7. It's a 2-card 7, plus I had to banish a card from my hand. So yeah, that's a signpost card, I would say, even if your opponent isn't marked. Anaphylactic Shock. It's definitely not a signpost card. This is not something you build an Arakni deck around. I think this is really a CC card. It doesn't block for anything, It's like, yeah, you might think, oh, it's like a danger digits at home. It's true damage, Bryce. You've been talking about how good true damage is. But the fact that it doesn't block and then it's a blue, and we've talked about that, like, we don't actually need blues all that much in limited assassin. I would say maybe leave anaphylactic shock at home. It's definitely not a reason to play Arakni. I do want to hit on Relentless Pursuit. This is like a role player plus in Arakni. If you can get your hands on it, you're really happy. It is a blue card, which I have said that maybe we don't need as much, but it's also a 3-block. It also is an uninteractable source of mark. It also recurs itself. If you've attacked a hero and you resolve this card, then you get to put it at the bottom of your deck, which means basically that you got a free mark and you also saved 3 life for later in the game. Like, this card is insane if you go to second cycle. Really like it. Also, having more ways to mark people on turn 0 is never a bad thing. Okay, it is getting late, so I'm going to move on to Fang. There's more I get to... Oh, under the trapdoor. We got to talk about this one, because this is a signpost card for Arakni. Like I said, you should have traps in your Arakni deck. If you're playing in limited, it's really, really good. This is the one that harkens back to... what's he called? Arakni through the trapdoor? Under the trap? The Demi Hero. It harkens back to the Demi Hero. He doesn't have a stealth attack, but he does have this, which is a majestic. It's an attack. Only comes in blue. 0 cost. Has stealth. Instant. Discard this. Banish target trap from your graveyard. If you do, you may play it this turn, and if it would be put into the graveyard this turn, instead banish it. This thing is a stealth attack that is also an on-demand defense reaction. Or you can pitch it and fuel your turn with it. It's absolutely insane. So, yeah, I would encourage you to go Arakni if you got this guy. Yeah, okay, we're gonna move on. I could yap all day. I am yapping all day. This is what I'm doing right now. Let's proceed into the warrior side of things. Let's talk about Fang. I'm gonna change my stream topic here. Fang. Okay. Moving on to yet another 3-0 list from Alex Vor. We're going into Fang. First, let's take a look at the hero text. Fang says, whenever you hit a marked hero, create a fealty token. If you control 3 or more fealty tokens, dagger attacks cost you 1 less to activate. Wouldn't you know it, these daggers cost 1 and they come in for 1. So your dagger attacks are free if you can get 3 of those fealty tokens online. So because of this, I think the discourse during the world premiere in Prague was all about how Fang makes the best use of fealty tokens, or he's like the one that needs them the most. And we covered during the Cindra portion of this video why I think that is both accurate but also kind of misunderstood a little bit, because yes, like he cares about them the most in that like his gameplay changes entirely from when you're online with 3 fealty tokens to when you're not. Like, he is fearsome when you have 3 fealty tokens. That being said, Cindra doesn't need them as much, but she can capitalize on them like instantly, right? With all of those Art of the Dragon cards that we were talking about. So, okay, we're not talking about Cindra anymore. We're talking about Fang. He likes fealty. He needs to mark people oftentimes in order to get fealty. That being said, a lot of his damage is pushed through with attack reactions. So most of the time, it's uninteractable. It's like true damage because your opponent doesn't know it's coming before they block. He also has access to these red alert pieces that we're talking about with Arakni. This is something I want to touch on at this point. This is a starting point. We mentioned this piece of equipment when we were talking about Arakni because Arakni can use it. However, it's way cooler in Fang. Let's read it one more time. It goes in the boot slot, blocks for 0. It says attack reaction, destroy this. Target attack gets go again. Activate this only if you've played a card or activated an ability this, reaction step. Now, Fang will often play cards, right? He wants to play attack reactions. more often than not, those attack reactions will give his daggers go again. He wants to be swinging daggers. He wants to be playing cards to give them go again. Let's say you're not in a situation where you have one of those cards, or you would rather save it for Draconic Chainlink 2, or you would just like to, you're forcing your opponent to block because you're at the end stages of the game and they have to, and you're holding a full grip, so they have to overblock because they think you have attack, whatever. Let's say instead you have a fealty token. You activate the ability of the fealty token on your first dagger swing once your opponent has already overblocked. Once you've activated the ability of this aura, you can then activate the attack reaction of Starting Point because it cares about playing a card or activating an ability in the reaction step. You can simply pop a fealty and then give one of your daggers go again. It's so powerful. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and take a look at I believe it was the finals of the Calling in Prague, where, oh my gosh, I always mix up his name. Simon Nielsen, the illustrious Magic player that has graced us with his presence in Flesh and Blood, uses this to amazing effect against, was he Brazilian? I think he was Italian. Yeah, I think he was Italian. Gianluigi was his name. Anyway, his opponent in the finals, he basically activated this Starting Point in the way that I described. He used a fealty token and then used Starting Point to give a dagger go again after Gianluigi had already overblocked. And then he comes in with something that automatically gets over the top because he has a reaction and Gianluigi only has 2 cards left and he closes out the game. Gianluigi was surprised by this, by the way, after making it through, 2-3 days? Was that calling 3? No, the calling was 2 days. Yeah, the calling was 2 days, but bottom line, it was a lot of games. It was like 14 or 15 games, and he had never seen this interaction play out this way. So, if there's one thing you can take away from this video, it's that Starting Point is dope in Fang, especially when you have a fealty token, and you can do some really nasty things against opponents that aren't expecting it. Okay, we've basically gone over all of the other equipment. I'm going to make a personal copy of this so I can go into edit mode because there is one piece of equipment that we haven't gone over yet that you can expect to see in the Hunted Limited, and that's Bunker Beard. It's generic. It's in the head slot. It has 0 block value on itself, but it says defense reaction, destroy this. You may add an action card from your arsenal to the active chain link as a defending card. Can be good. Is really nice if you... I would much rather have this than no head slot, but because it fits into all the heroes. But a lot of the times you're not going to have an arsenal. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into the closing moments of the game against an opponent that has this in their head slot, but I have the tempo and they're blocking me out every single turn, and they don't have a card in arsenal. So I guess I would say if you have this in your equipment suite, maybe don't put it in over like a red alert piece or a leapfrog piece. But if you do happen to have to play it in the head slot, look for opportunities to use it earlier than later so you don't lose value on it. I haven't taken a look at chat in a while. Kiwi Soccer says that's so cool. I think you're so cool, Kiwi Soccer. Okay, let's go into the role players of this deck. Right now, I am drawn immediately to probably, I would give this one a role player plus. This is Tooth of the Dragon. It's a 0 cost. Your next draconic attack this turn gets +3. It's a draconic instant. It is not a reaction, which means that it doesn't block, which is a major downside, but it has several major upsides. Number 1, it is red. This is a little bit fringe, but it's red, so you can play this to then activate the go again clause of a Blaze Headlong. Having 0 for 4 go again is sweet. Normally only ninjas do it, but this allows Warrior to do that too. It is not a reaction, which means that if an opponent does the thing that I described earlier, where they block your first dagger with red alert boots, you get to play this, give your dagger go again, which I guess we haven't gone over the daggers yet. So I should probably just read these. So I I'm doing my diligence. Get it? Obsidian Firevein says, once per turn action, pay 1 resource, attack. If you've played a Draconic card, this chain link, not this turn. If you've played it, this chain link, which is why he cares so much about reactions and instants. If you've done that, this attack gets +1 and go again. Comes in at 1 at its base. So the cool thing about that is you can incur it. You can ask your opponent to block the first dagger. You can resolve Tooth of the Dragon, which, because it is a Draconic card and because it's an instant, you can play it during the chain link that the dagger is on the active chain. It'll give the dagger +1 and go again. And it'll also give your next Draconic attack +3. So it does this cool thing we're going to call sidestepping, which is what Brian Gottlieb referred to it as. So it's in the diction, it's in the canon forever. Anytime you can sidestep with this dagger and make your opponent do dumb things, that's what Warrior wants to do, right? Ultimately, it's the class that makes the defenders do dumb things that don't matter. And even if you do the safe thing, like I described, block with a red alert piece of equipment because you expect your opponent to play an attack reaction, then the red alert vest won't get the +1. The Obsidian Firevein will still get in for 1. It'll have go again. Not only will your second dagger be beefed up by the Tooth of the Dragon, but then you have the all clear to use some of these attack reactions that care about 2 or more Draconic chain links with impunity. And chances are your opponent hasn't blocked properly based on the first attack, so you're going to get a little bit of true damage in there as well. So Tooth of the Dragon is a role player plus. The more of these you can fit into the Fang deck, the better. There are a couple other versions of this card that I want to go over. Number 1 is Pledge Fealty. Pledge Fealty is also a Draconic instant. 0 cost red. Says create a Fealty token. It's good. On its face, it seems amazing because it helps you get into the second phase of the Fang game, which is once you have 3 Fealty tokens and your daggers are free and online. It does that sidestepping thing that we were talking about, but you can find yourself in a situation where it's useless because either it doesn't get you to that fabled 3 Fealty or it doesn't come in early enough in the game to where you're like, okay, cool, I'm establishing a board state. It doesn't have any numerical value on the back end of it like Tooth of the Dragon does. It has +3 for your next Draconic attack. So this one borders on a trap in Fang. So be careful about filling your deck with these, especially if you've got more Draconic instants. You have to be sparing about the amount of non-blocks you put in your deck in any format. Least of all, or potentially most of all, the Hunted. Let's go over the other one, which is Proclaim Vengeance. I remembered that. Proclaim Vengeance is another 0 cost Draconic instant. Says mark target opposing hero. If that hero is Arakni, gain 1 resource. On his face, seems kind of cool, like what Fang wants to do. But the reason I like Pledge Fealty better than this is because the whole reason that Fang is marking people at all is so he gets the Fealty tokens. So you might as well just have a non-interactable form of getting a Fealty token in the first place rather than monkey with this whole mark them in instant speed and then have to consume the mark. Because there's instances where if they block it out, then you're kind of up a river. Bottom line, it's extra steps from what you're actually trying to accomplish. Okay, so I would say Proclaim Vengeance, definitely a trap. Pledge Fealty, more than 1, probably a trap in limited. But especially if you have a high density of Tooth of the Dragon, Tooth of the Dragon goes in over Pledge Fealty or Proclaim Vengeance every single time. In a sealed pool where you probably have a lot of chaff that can be used as 3 blocks, like Cut Deep or Sworn Vengeance or Knife Through Butter, I would probably rather have those than a second copy of Pledge Fealty or Proclaim Vengeance. Careful with these, they could be traps. Tooth of the Dragon, not a trap. The upside of it warrants the no block Fill your deck with these. Don't fill your deck with Proclaim Vengeance or Pledge Fealty. Okay. More role players. Sworn Vengeance, I would say, is a role player here. It comes in at action speed. It's not a reaction. So chances of it get like your daggers are not going to get go again or the little buff from it. So I would be careful about running too many of these. Honestly, what I'd really be careful of is convincing yourself to resolve too many of these rather than block with them. Because really what Fang cares about is the reactions or the cards played in the chain link reaction step. So be careful about hedging your game plan too much on the non-attack actions, because oftentimes it's not helping you do what you want to do. Like the fact that these Obsidian Fireveins get the +1 as well as the go again from the reactions just gets your cards more on par with the numbers that you need to be competing with in Cindra, and yes, sometimes Arakni when he has Web of Deceit online. That being said, let's talk about another role player that is at action speed, but really shows its value. It's Cut Deep. It's a 0 for 4 go again. As simple as that. 0 for 4 go again. They're just good cards. That's what we want to be doing in Flesh and Blood. We want to be getting 4 value from our cards. And the reason for that is the majority of the time you can depend on cards getting at least 3 value, because a lot of them, especially class cards, have 3 block value. So anytime you can get 4 instead, looking at you, Sink Below, looking at you, Fate Foreseen, looking at you, Cut Deep, which says your next dagger attack this turn gets +4 go again. That's what we want to be doing, getting 4 value from our cards. Now, this one I am putting at higher value than Sworn Vengeance, because Sworn Vengeance is only a +3, and when this hits a hero, mark them. Yes, you want to be marking people, but ultimately you want to be doing damage and killing them. So just that extra +1 on this card makes it worthwhile. Okay, other role players, Searing Gaze is huge. Target dagger attack gets +2. If you control 2 or more Draconic Chain Links, it gets, when this hits a hero, mark them. Now, we would much rather be playing this on Chain Link 2, on our second dagger. But if you have to play it on the first one, it gets your dagger to a breakpoint of 4, which is still good and gives it go again, right? There is a 1-cost version of this card, which is not Sizzling Steel. Oh, it's called Burning Blade, I think. Blade? It's something Blade. Oh yeah, sure, Bryce. Type Blade into a warrior. Blistering Blade. Here we go. Nope. That's the +3 one. Oh, bad dog. I can't remember the name of it. I'm going to have to work that out, Marcus, before we're in the booth together. It's Searing Blade. Okay. Well, let's move on to Blistering Blade, since I'm here. Blistering Blade is kind of like Searing Gaze, only it's not going to care about marking. It's the same condition clause. Target dagger attack gets +2 if you control 2 or more Draconic Chain Links. The difference is that you get an extra bit of power for your trouble in creating extra chain links. So if we're talking about thematic pairs, Searing Gaze and the card, I can't remember its name. I'm going to type mark in here. That's going to help me. Will mark if you have 2 or more Draconic Chain Links. The difference between the two is 0 cost or 1 cost. Oh, I need to be on page 1. There we go. Stabbing Pain. Ugh. Can't believe I couldn't remember that one. Stabbing Pain costs 1. Target dagger attack gets +3. If you control 2 or more Draconic Chain Links, it gets, when this hits your hero, mark them. Stabbing Pain and Searing Gaze go together. Blistering Blade and Sizzling Steel go together. Sizzling Steel is a 1-cost version of Blistering Blade for your troubles. For that extra resource, you get an extra 1 value. Target dagger attack gets +3. If you control 2 or more Draconic Chain Links, instead it gets +4. All 4 of these cards that I've named are role players. Searing Gaze, Stabbing Pain, Sizzling Steel, Blistering Blade. There is another thematic set that come in probably at role player plus. Like if you could fill your deck with these, if you could take all of your Searing Gazes and Sizzling Steels and Blistering Blades and turn them into this set of reactions, then you would be in a good spot. And that is Affirm Loyalty and Endear Devotion. The difference between these two guys are 0 cost and 1 cost. They're both Draconic Warrior attack reactions. They both block for 2, unfortunately, but you don't want to be blocking with these cards anyway. The reason these cards are dope is because they say target dagger attack gets +3 or +2 in the case of Affirm Loyalty. If you control 2 or more Draconic Chainlinks, create a fealty token. And LSS recognizes that they are role player pluses because they're at the rarity. You can't expect to find a lot of these in a sealed pool or in a draft pod because they have that rare tag on them. But if you can get your hands on them, they are, like I said, role player pluses, maybe even signpost cards to go into Fang. And the reason being is because you're doing by resolving these cards on Chainlink, on Draconic Chainlink 2 or more, is you are sidestepping all of the steps that you have to do to get to your end goal, which is to create fealty tokens. You want to have 3 fealty tokens as quickly as possible to make your daggers free as quickly as possible, because then you go from kind of being sort of on rate to being way above rate with your resources. And the fact that this just is an uninteractable way to create a fealty token rather than having to mark somebody, go to your next turn, then swing your daggers again, hope they hit to then consume the mark to get the fealty token. They're awesome. And this is exactly what Fang wants to be doing as quickly as possible. So if I could replace these, even though Alex got 3-0 on this list, if I could replace the Searing Gazes and the Sizzling Steels and the Blistering Blades and the Imperial Intents for that matter, for Affirm Loyalty and Endear Devotion, I absolutely would. That brings me to this role player minus. This is Imperial Intent. It's a 1-cost Draconic Warrior attack reaction. It's another thematic pair with Dynastic Dedication. This costs 1 less to play for each Draconic Chainlink you control. Target dagger attack gets +2. Now, you might look at this on its face and say, 1, the art is freaking dope, which it is. You wouldn't be wrong about that. But you might also say that this is everything that Fang wants to do. Because, yeah, sure, it costs 1, but you better believe that I'm going to swing the dagger and then react with it to give the dagger +2. It'll get +1 on its own, get go again. I've played a Draconic card. It's all gravy. The thing is, if you compare it to a card like Searing Gaze, it's the exact same card. Only Searing Gaze has extra upside if you're able to resolve it on Chainlink 2 or greater. So if you're ever in a situation where you're trying to choose between these two cards, there's one that is just absolutely better than the other. And the same goes for Dynastic Dedication. Dynastic Dedication is cut from the same cloth as Imperial Intent. Instead, it costs 2. Also costs 1 less for each Draconic Chainlink you control. Target dagger attack gets +3. So oftentimes this one is, I would say that this one is definitely worse than Imperial Intent because you can't resolve it for 0 on the first dagger. Obviously, the art is dope once again, but you can find better options. And you usually will. Oftentimes, you only want to take these guys or fill your deck with them if you are desperate for them. Get your Searing Gazes, your Blistering Blades, your Sizzling Steels in first, and then fill out the rest of what you need with the Imperial Intents with the Dynastic Dedications. Okay. We've done role players pluses, role player minuses. I'm looking at potential traps right now. So some of the potential traps I see are Knife Through Butter, which, don't get me wrong, you can use this card to great effect, but you usually need to have attack action cards to supplement with it. This says your next dagger attack gets +X, depends on the color on the card. In this case, we're looking at a yellow, so it's +3. Red will be +4. Blue will be +2. Whenever you attack a marked hero this turn, the attack gets go again. So The best use case for this is to resolve it at the start of the turn. Let's say you resolve a red one and you have a place headlong in your hand. That is maybe not the best example because that one will go again from the red anyway. Let's say instead you have For the Drakai, which, by the way, this entire set, For the Drakai, For the Emperor, For the Realm, are pretty good cards in Fang because they say when this attacks a marked hero, which you want to be doing anyway, you want to be marking heroes, create a fealty token. It's just another uninteractable way to create fealty tokens, and then you have the added benefit of potentially hitting that marked hero and creating another one. The fact that this card can generate 2 fealty tokens when you want a magic number of 3, it's insane. But so let's go back to my example. Let's say you resolve the red Knife Through Butter, then you go For the Drakai. What the heck? Let's say the opposing hero is marked as well. You've got a 4 go again attacked. You got a 4 go again attack, which will potentially create another fealty token and also potentially get you up to that magic 3. So then you can continue the rest of the turn with 0 cost Obsidian Fire Veins and instead use those 2 floating resources on Sizzling Steels or Stabbing Pains or the like, right? So there are use cases for Knife Through Butter. It also blocks 3, which is pretty sick, but I think a lot of people will be trapped into thinking that they are going to have the opposing hero marked a lot more than they actually are, especially with Fang. And so when you're resolving the non-attack actions in Warrior, you're actively taking value away from your Obsidian Fire Veins. If you can instead be using the reactions, you have the added benefit of true damage against an opponent that doesn't know what they're actually blocking. And you are potentially taking away the +1 bonus that Obsidian Fire Vein gets by having you play something in the reaction step. I hope that makes sense. Point of engagement is a similar thing. It's a similar trap that you might fall into. I will say this with the caveat that that same game I was referencing, the finals at Calling Prague, Simon Nielsen was drafting in a pod where he ended up going a Fang archetype that is pretty unintuitive to the average player. He went non-attack action Fang. He only had a few reactions just because he wasn't seeing them, but he noticed that a lot of his cards cared about opponents being marked. And so he was kind of like, well, maybe I don't need the fealty tokens. Maybe I'll just capitalize on this whole marking thing. And Point of Engagement is one of those cards that do it alongside Knife Through Butter. Knife Through Butter is the go again version of Point of Engagement. Point of Engagement instead says until end of turn, your attacks get +1 while attacking a marked hero. It also has a +3 on it for your next dagger attack if you're resolving it in the red. So I would say that by and large, these non-attack actions are going to be traps, except for the fact that if you have them in your resource slot, they're going to be blocking for 3. So that's pretty sick. And Fang definitely needs blues, as you can see based on Alex's deck here. He's sitting on 7 in the main board. If you can block with them and they're in your resource base, great. If you happen to open a non-attack action version of the deck in your sealed pool, go for it. But just know that it took kind of an advanced player to make that archetype work. Not saying it can't work. I think the bread and butter version of how Fang is going to play and how you might want to approach it on your first time holding these physical cards might be more traditional attack reaction, a more attack reaction style. Excuse me, I've been talking a long time, so my brain is starting to turn into mud a little bit. Moving on, we touched on For the Drakai. Create a fealty token. I just want to show you the art for all of the other through line of this card. For the Drakai looks like this. This is the one that creates fealty tokens when it attacks a marked hero. For the Emperor is the 1 cost, comes in at 5 power, also blocks for 3. And then For the Realm is the 2 cost. I think in general, you're going to, if you're taking these cards and you have the choice between all three of them, for the Drakai and for the Emperor are going to be the ones you want. Because if we picture, maybe there's a world in Fang where you would want For the Realm, because you could go Obsidian Firevein, 0 cost, react, ideally Tooth of the Dragon into For the Realm. I think the 1 cost is more enticing for Cindra. 0 costs or just 0 cost 4s are just always great because you can block out with 3 cards and then send that, or heck, 4 cards and then send it from Arsenal. So 0 for 4s are just sick. But there's a world where you can say the 2 cost is better for Fang, the 1 cost is better for Cindra, or vice versa, depending on the way you build the deck. What else should we go over? We should definitely touch on Hunt a Killer. Another non-attack action, which can be a bit of a trap because it says mark on it, but you also are, if you don't have the extra reaction cards to support it, you're basically losing value on the text of Obsidian Firevein. So be careful with those. Alex has them in his resource base, and I think that's pretty telling. He doesn't have any reds, or he does have yellows, but he's got them in the inventory slot. Role player pluses are Den of the Spider and Smoke Out, the Draconic defense reaction. And we already went over the efficacy of defense reactions in this limited format. For all the reasons I said before, it's dope. We should mention that Sigil of Solace is an amazing card because of all those sources of true damage that we were alluding to earlier. Sigil of Solace is just an amazing way to essentially block 3 without always having to block. Sigil of Solace is always a block 3 card. No matter which way you slice it, always a block 3 card. And when you have people flicking daggers at you, or in other formats like Rosetta, you have people doing arcane damage to you, sometimes having a dependable block 3 in any situation is worth its weight in gold. We should bring up another cool interaction of Sigil of Solace. Let's say that you've already used your starting point, because you have that as well. Let's say you have a fealty token and we're getting towards the end stages of the game. Let's say you have 3 and you have a Sigil of Solace in hand. You swing a dagger for free. You can pop one of those fealty tokens, play Sigil of Solace, because it'll give any card the keyword Draconic. It'll give your Obsidian Firevein go again and also heal you up quite a bit. So Sigil of Solace is just a good card in any one of these decks. Sigil of Solace is good. Maybe with the exception of Cindra. But like, I don't think you're ever going to be ultimately sad to have Sigil of Solace in your deck. It's also great just because you can like put it in Arsenal and bait out things like Arakni Funnel Web's reaction, or Mark of the Funnel Web, etc. I mean, all the reasons that Sigil of Solace is still good in limited. That's all I'll say on that. Incision is, we talked about this potentially being a trap in Arakni, because you don't actually want to be, like, it's not super efficient for you to swing daggers with the hope of resolving attack reactions on them, because you inherently end up below rate. Incision in Fang is much better because it's just a way to close out games. I guess it's a trap like the non-attack actions, in that you don't want to fill your entire deck with them. Here's a role player we didn't talk about. This is not a role player in Assassin, I don't think, but it definitely is in Fang, because it's more sources of marking. And it comes in at a 0 cost attack reaction. Target dagger gets +3, and when this hits a hero, mark them. And hey, let's say you're in a situation where you have to pop a fealty token in order to give an Obsidian Firevein go again with Scar Tissue. That's great, because you're going to, you're going down 1 fealty token, but oftentimes you can view it as net neutral, because if you're doing that, that generally means you don't have another Draconic card to play anyway, which would ostensibly mean that your fealty tokens are going to go away at the end of the turn. So popping a fealty token to Plague Scar Tissue to give Obsidian Firevein go again is an amazing play because it keeps what fealty tokens you have stacked up around for future turns. It also marks your opponent, which will probably lead to another fealty token down the line. So that's one of the reasons that Scar Tissue is more of a role player in this deck than Incision, even though Incision will block 3 and Scar Tissue blocks 2. That's why I think it's, again, very telling that Alex Vore has 3 of these bad boys in his main board, along with 2 of the Tooth of the Dragon. Role players. Okay, let's go over... We did a little bit of the trappage. Yeah, we covered like non-attack action. Warrior is probably not the way you want to be going. It's probably a trap for this first go around for pre-release. Any of these effects like twist and turn that allow you to swing an additional time with daggers may seem dope because you're like, oh, I'm going to have 3 fealty tokens and be able to swing my daggers a billion times, right, Bryce? Well, generally speaking, you're not going to have the Draconic cards in hand to facilitate that many sources of go again. And like Assassin, you generally don't want to be planning on playing Fang like a 5-card hero or like a 5 or even 4-card hero. You generally want to be playing him like a 3-card hero. Your pitch card, your first reaction, and then your second reaction. And effects like this that are going to encourage you to think that you have the resources and the space to swing with daggers a billion times are probably convincing you to go in the wrong direction with the deck. So be careful about that. The other one is Take a Stab, I believe. Yeah, Take a Stab. We went over this one in Assassin. It's definitely more of a trap in Assassin, I think, than it is in Warrior, just because the daggers cost less. There is a world where you get a nutty turn with fealty tokens online where you actually get to swing daggers 3 times. And that's all great, but generally speaking, you're not going to have the Draconic cards in hand or the room from your opponent in order to make that happen. So we've gone over some of the traps in Warrior. We've gone over the role players, the role player pluses. Let's talk about some signpost cards. First of all, yeah, I mean, affirm loyalty and demonstrate devotion. I'm just going to go ahead and say those are signpost cards. They're kind of towing the line between that and role player plus, but we're going to go ahead and give them that moniker. Brothers of Flame and Sisters of Flame. This is another thematic pair. Brothers of Flame costs 1. Says play this only if you control 2 or more Draconic chain links. Target dagger attack gets +4. It's a Draconic warrior attack reaction. Sisters of Flame says the exact same thing, only it's a 0 cost and gives the dagger +3. Got to be careful with these two. You definitely don't want to fill your deck with them because that'll just inherently lead to situations where they are stuck in your arsenal or your hand because you can't get to Chainlink 2. Or you have to use too many resources to get there, and you just don't have a situation like I said, your opponents are just not going to be leaving you with a lot of breathing room. There's a lot of damage in this set. So most of the time you're just not going to have the time to keep 5-card hands too much. And I think one of the finer points of this limited format is identifying the moment where you can just keep 5-card hands and take a ton of damage because you know you're going to have the tempo for the rest of the game. But putting yourself in a situation where you have to do that in order to get value on your cards is always going to be hairy in this format. So be careful of Brothers of Flame and Sisters of Flame. Okay, I said we're doing signpost cards. I just did another trap card. Let's keep moving. Bubble of the Surface is so weird. Be careful of this card too in both Cindra and Fang. Yeah, Bubble of the Surface I just don't think is good in either of these decks because I'm not even going to go over it. Just don't use that card for this first go around. Compounding Anger is kind of interesting, only in Cindra, not in Fang. Dice, not a signpost card. It's a good one. Let's go over Fire and Brimstone. We spoiled this card. I'm super stoked about it. I don't really think that it is a signpost card for Fang, though, in this format. It's nice to have. It blocks 3. It's almost never going to be outright bad, but getting this 4 chain link wide dagger turn, like I said, is you probably just don't have the time to get there. Classic Constructed is a completely different story. But in this case, don't take this card or put it in your deck expecting to resolve it every single game. It's not like a reliable win condition, in my opinion. Unless you find it super early, park it in Arsenal, and then happen to draw up a bunch of great reactions that are going to constantly give these daggers go again. Flurry Stance, no. Hunt the Hunter is great, by the way. I think Alex has one of these in his deck. That's probably a role player plus more uninteractable sources of marking. Hunt's End. That's an interesting card. I don't think it's a signpost, but holy cow, if you have a deck that can pull it off. 0 for 4 at reaction speed. Also gives a dagger go again. It's pretty insane. Long Whisker Loyalty might be one of those signpost cards. It comes in at the Majestic rarity. It's tough, though. You really don't want to be resolving it unless you're on Chainlink 2 or higher. It is another source of marking. Yeah, let's call it a signpost card. Fang, honestly, I feel like doesn't have that many, like, oh, I have this card, I'm going to completely build around it and make this Fang deck based on that, besides, like, Affirm Loyalty and Demonstrate Devotion. Excuse me, Endear Devotion. Demonstrate Devotion is the ninja version of it. Okay, Savor Bloodshed, once again. That's probably a signpost card, even though it's a non-attack action, and I said be careful of those. Fang can definitely take advantage of it. I would say even more than Arakni. I keep second guessing when I say that. It's just a damn good card. Like, put Savor Bloodshed in your draft decks and in your sealed decks. Scalding Iron. We're going to shift back into traps again. Scalding Iron is a trap. Both probably in CC and in limited. You're just never going that many links for it to get any extra value. Like, you're maybe going to get 2 value off of it, and in that case, I would much rather have a Searing Gaze or a Blistering Blade. Oath of Loyalty. Honestly, Oath of Loyalty is probably a signpost card for Fang. I mean, it's dope. I don't know if it's like I wouldn't say this is a card I would take and then be like, I'm going to build a Fang deck around this. No, it is. What am I saying? Because it automatically gets you to Chainlink 2 for your reactions. And it's a 0 for 4 go again. The dilemma in my mind was like, yeah, you have the fealty tokens to like cheat around you can only play draconic cards for the rest of the turn. But then I was like, well, but then you're giving up too many resources to get to the game state that you want to get to, which is 3 fealty tokens. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say this is a signpost card for Fang. One, because he has the fealties usually to get around it, but also you can just block to... You can block to get to the optimal situation to play out this card. It also gets you to Draconic Chainlink 2 faster to get the extra benefit off of your reaction cards. Boom. Signpost card. Take Oath of Loyalty, put it in your Fang decks. Outed is a really interesting card. We've been talking about it a lot on the AG Pro team about it being really good. And I do think it is. The no block is scary, but I could definitely see a world where it's good in Fang. Speaking of which, other role players from the generic side of things are Pursuit of the Edge of Oblivion, Pursuit of the Pits of Despair, and Public Bounty. Public Bounty is great because it's a pump to any attack that comes after it, and it's uninteractable mark. We love that. Pursuit of the Edge of Oblivion, probably over Pursuit to the Pits of Despair because we love 0 for 4s that block 3. Rake Over the Coals is probably a trap for anybody but maybe Cindra, but I don't think it's even good in Cindra because you're never quite going that wide to where you're going to get more than like 3 value off of that. There's our Sisters of Fire we were talking about potentially being a trap if you fill your deck with it. Agility Stance, probably a trap. Dual Threat is probably a trap in Limited. You just don't have the control over your deck to get value out of both sides of that card, and if you're getting only one of those +3s, I can't imagine it's worth it. We already talked about Perforate when we were in Assassin. Probably not that great in Limited in general. It's definitely going to be better in Warrior than it is Assassin. Sharpened Senses, probably not even that great. Like, definitely not a signpost card. Sorry, I'm speeding up a little bit because I do need to wrap this up. It's about time to go back to real life. Relentless Pursuit, we talked about being a great card in Arakni, also a great card in Fang. Definitely less enticing in Cindra, because even though I've been really hyping what Cindra can do with Fealty, it's not like she needs to do it on like turn 0 or anything. You might honestly just want more damage density on your turn 0 turns as Cindra. But yeah, really, really solid Fang card. Okay, that mainly wraps it up. So folks, I'm going to get going in just a second here. I hope that you've found what we've been talking about really useful here. I did want to show you a little bit of gameplay, but I just got really jazzed talking about all these heroes, and I didn't have a super stringent format when coming into this video. I just really wanted to get it on the internet and talk about my favorite card game, and I wanted to do it with you, the viewers of Arcane Games and Events. So thank you for making my Friday. I hope I made yours a little bit better. I'll do one more round of plugs before we go here, but before that, I just want to wish you the best of luck at your pre-releases and your limited futures in general. I hope to see you all at the AGE in February, where we are really going to dive into this draft format and show you what the best of the best can do when their back is up against the wall. Okay, before we go, one more round of plugs. I already talked about this one. This is the Arcane Games and Events Open Series going on here in the West. Get your tickets at www.age.events and join us on February 1st for a hunted draft AGE Open at Top Deck Keep in Riverside, California. We have absolutely loved being there, and we hope they love us too. It seems like it so far, but let's keep up the good vibes, and we'll see you there. Next up is AGE East. As I mentioned before, February 9th is going to be the inaugural AGE East Open. It's going to be a little weird because we are piggybacking on the Road to Nationals at Great Stories Comics and Gaming in Whitensville, Massachusetts. The only thing that is different from a normal RTN is, one, there's going to be AGE points up for grabs that players can use to qualify for the first ever Eastern Players Championship. Two, the regular gang at Arcane Games and Events will be casting this event remotely from our studio in Los Angeles. And three, it's going to be a lot of good vibes. There's going to be a lot of good players there that you ordinarily wouldn't see at a Road to Nationals. So we're really excited about it. Go to east.age.events to get your tickets. It's going to direct you straight to Great Stories Comics and Gaming's website, where you can buy a ticket to their Road to Nationals directly. Next up, join our Discord for deck lists, show matches, community events, and more. That invite URL is discord.age.events. Next up is volunteering and donating to victims of the Los Angeles wildfires here in the greater LA area. We've got people in our community that have been directly affected, have lost homes, have been evacuated, etc. If you happen to have spare resources that you can donate or spare time that you can use to volunteer, please go to socalhelp.age.events. We've put together a lot of helpful resources there in case you are feeling spirited. Last but not least is the Arcane Games and Events Pro Team. We are going to be streaming once again after our little hiatus from the Osaka World Championship and the holiday in general. Please look out for more of myself, more anti-meta Anthony, more Josh Goggles, and all of the gang here at Arcane Games and Events. We've got a fantastic cast of folks that I have the pleasure of interacting with every single day, and I hope you will enjoy what they put out there on the internet as well. Like I said, that does it for me, folks. Thank you so much for hanging out. I hope you found what you saw and heard useful. I can't wait to see you at pre-release. Until then, have a great night and have a great weekend. Cheers, everybody.